Welcome back to episode 69, season 6 of The Geometric View. Thank you for being here. Today we cover a sundry of different topics, one of my favorite conversations that we've had thus yet. Check it out, stay tuned. It gets very interesting all the way through. Looks like the 2022 Electromagnetic Universe World Expo is turning out to be great with big name performers.
I'm Buddy James, your host.
The link is in the show notes below.
Let's get into the circuit.
We greatly appreciate your support. The best way to donate to us is on PayPal. Just send money directly to goldenscaling@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
I did that paper way back about ultra cold plasmas versus Bose-Einstein condensates, and it got me thinking about the entire issue of condensates. And I really think that essentially, because of the dichotomy that's happened in science, because of the two different camps that formed, the three if you count the quantum people as separate from us. I don't personally, but I could see where some would. Like they would think quantum people, the way they act, that they're sort of on their own camp. But I see them as part of our cosmology, and I don't think that they fit in well with the relativists. I think the relativists just kind of borrow from them. But my mentality is that essentially you had two different groups finding the same shit, which is ultimately crystal plasma, and then trying to describe them differently. My question is, if it's metallic and it's hydrogen, but it's metallic, if it's conductive, and we're talking about hydrogen, which means it's a gas naturally, and it ionizes easily, how the fuck do you not have a crystal plasma when you're talking liquid metallic hydrogen? And so my mentality is that what they're projecting, every time he talks about the spectrum and he talks about all of the issues with the sun, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, but what do you know about, liquid crystal plasma, which we know exists on account of the fact that, well, there's TVs with liquid crystal plasma in them. So I would really like to know, because it's out of my range of expertise, what is the actual difference? I mean, from a quantum physicist, I'd like to seriously hear him say what the difference would be between them. Because it sounds all like just part of the same spectrum of different shit to me. And I can only speak for myself. What's interesting is that Robitaille actually has a condensed matter plasma paper. And it was one of his earlier one, like maybe his 8th one in. So he's being influenced at some point, on some level, by Walt Thornhill and company. So what happened there? Why did he go his own route? I mean, was he looking for special rewards and money, or does he really doubt plasmas everywhere? I don't know, but I do know he's wrong about the sun not having an electric surface, because there's vortices that are on the surface. And we know about the electric field emanating from the sun because of the acceleration. You can't explain that with liquid metallic hydrogen. So he can't be 100% right. I'm not sure that he's 100% wrong either.
Well, he's modeling Jupiter.
Right.
He's taking Jupiter or Saturn, gas giants, and modeling the sun off of those. Mistake.
Well, correct. Yeah.
That's a big fucking mistake. And that led him to liquid metal hydrogen. So, big mistake.
Yeah, because I don't think any of us are arguing that Saturn and Jupiter aren't condensed material at this point.
Well, there is a huge envelope of gas around those two rocky bodies.
Of course there is.
And
their electrification state is what's changed. Their plasma behavior state is what's changed.
How do you mean?
Well, if they weren't inside of the sun's coronosphere, if it was back in the old days, A, I don't think it would have split apart, and B, They may themselves individually, even or together, but separate from the sun, they might start to have strong enough currents to flow again that they would start to glow and anode glow again. It'd be a low glow.
Yes, but we understand from Wallace, the EU, that it's a plasma sheath. It's nothing but a thin sheath of plasma surrounding this rocky body. It's not a planet. It's not a giant, huge chunk of mass. There's a planet on the inside, yes, but it's not this huge planet with this massive ball of plasma around it. It's just basically a plasma sheath, and there's space in between the planet that's there and the sheath.
Correct.
And there's a lot of space.
And this is mainstream. You know what's weird to me is that Pierre and others, even Robert DeCinti, who I admire, don't talk about there is a de facto well-known electrical connection that has already been proven in the mainstream between Jupiter and Io, and it's not up for debate. It's there.
Yeah.
So the issue that I have is if people ignore the evidence that's right in fucking front of them. This is why I'm not mad at Graham Hancock. I'm disappointed because I'm including right in the intro of the Megafauna paper quotes that I'm attributing from his book, and B, how can you see this data and not want to read more? As soon as you read that quote about Thomas Jefferson and the Delaware Indians, you should want to know more. It should hit all the, because when you listen to his Secrets of North America or whatever, Hidden North America book, you're sitting there going, Thunderbolts, Thunderbirds, Plasma. You're wondering how he's getting to this point. And you and I have talked about this, Rick. And the audience doesn't know you very well. I think it'd be good for you to kind of, riff this morning. But we've talked about this. Some people seem to want to be in mystery more than they want to have answers, which I don't see the point of asking questions if you don't want answers.
No, what I'm finding is people want information, not answers. They just want information. They just want.
You mean they just want to feed their head?
Yeah, exactly. They want as much information as possible, and hopefully they can figure it out from there.
Jefferson Airplane.
But what they're doing is they're overlooking certain tidbits of information, and they're not realizing that they're key. I mean, they're fucking absolute key to understanding what the hell's going on.
Well, think about my favorite, Ancient Architect, and Andy's a fan of this guy. Nick's a fan of this guy, but the problem is the guy he starts one place and then he goes and then a couple of years later he's like, I no longer think that thing, and he has looked at the electric power plant Giza. But because he's not an engineer, he cannot understand what Chris Dunn is saying. He really cannot. He just thinks it's fantastic.
Oh yeah, I've got replies from him like this, just recently. Oh, show me a paper from the Electric Universe on the subject.
On the subject of the power plant?
Well, no, on the subject that he was talking about. I can't remember what it was. I said there's plenty of Electric Universe papers, but you just have to go there and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, he's been sent my
Ramon, do you agree or disagree with Chris Dunn? Just real quick, because I invited him to speak. I've been inviting him all year. We've been having a back and forth dialogue. But he's
protege Eric.
What's that?
You should have told me I'm friends with his protege Eric, and Chris has come and spoken at the Ancient Kentucky historical. So,
Oh,
you know,
I guess I could have, yeah, I could have dropped your name, but we've been having a good rapport back and forth. He's
okay.
just waiting for his newest book to come out. And he's
No,
working with the publisher, and he's also got some health issues, so he can't make it.
he's probably 88% of the way there. There is, it's not like printed circuit board, but there is some circuitry that must have existed because, okay, let's say you got this maser going, your pyramid gas is filled up the place. You can't just open the chamber and go make an adjustment here and there to tune this thing, but the Earth's resonance is constantly, yeah, the Schumann resonance is the same, but as you know, the plasma sphere is going up, going down. They're going to have some kind of control mechanism, some way of changing, little fine tuning that they're going to have built in. And he's not been able to identify that. I suspect because they were made of wood, and I suspect that it's all rotted long ago, or was taken out by some of the early explorers, hoping that it was treasure. You know, when you have henchmen, and you're the head guy, and you're not really a trained archaeologist in the first fucking place, and you're under the gun to find something. According to Hancock's research, you're under the gun to find something because you got investors who think that there's big ass treasure hoard in the center. And then you have the henchmen. You tell the henchmen, bring me anything you find. Fuck, they could have burned it that night for campfire wood. You know, we don't know. There may have been an entire lattice of wood formed like remnant for control mechanisms that were reaching through various shafts or from the bottom, but they had to have some way that they drained all that acid. And that's why there's all that pumping system. They had to drain the fucking acid into the river at times. It was dangerous shit. I mean, they have these pits at Dougherty, Oregon, and other ones nearby. What are they manufacturing in the center of that pit? It's got to be 20 feet down, so 40 feet down, and have a granite, floor. I mean, something extremely caustic. So, you know, whatever control mechanisms they had in place, we don't understand those, and he didn't have anything to say about that part, and he obviously did not at the time that Chris Dunn wrote that book. Okay, here's what happened. When I met him, I said, what do you know about the plasma electric universe? And he was like, read my book and, come back to me about plasma. Then later he meets my friend Eric, and Eric is at Rolls-Royce Engineering. He starts explaining it, and that enlightened Chris, because he's not an electrical engineer, he's a mechanical. And so it expands his mind. So now he's got this new book that's going to be coming out with more proof of machining, power tools, etc. But what he doesn't know, I suspect, is about Christian Birkeland's Torella experiments and the 30-degree latitude mark. That electrum pyramidion that's missing is key. And figuring out where that pyramidion went is really key. I would suspect it's right in the sand around the fucking dune. They may even know about it or have moved it. But I mean, it's not. I don't think it melted. I don't think it vaporized. Not completely. It would have left some amount of it up on top. It's too heavy for the caliphate to pull off the top and melt down. So what happened to the fucking electrum pyramidion? Now, of course, the alien people are going to be like, well, the aliens took it with them. I expect that's a good hypothesis as far as sort of scientific ideas go. But something happened, and it caused an explosion inside the chamber, and the chamber was pushed out by a foot. So Chris Dunn is, I think, by far the most obvious correct answer. It's not a water tower. That's ridiculous. Or water pumping system. It's completely asinine. You don't need that much engineering to have a water tower. You just don't. And the Egyptians were not dumb. The real Egyptians, they were not dumb. So that power plant is a absolute masterpiece. I think we could easily build one better, but we'd have to base it.
Okay, so you don't think it's a Hang on a minute.
Power plant, hydraulic water plant.
Well, do you think that I mean, there's so many of them that have been built before the Great Pyramid. Everyone's always talking about the Great Pyramid like it's different than the rest of them. Like we didn't build all the rest of them to be like power towers or power stations, and then all of a sudden we built this one to do that. That doesn't make sense to me.
They've never opened up the middle one. I would assume that the smaller ones are all working towards the big one. That's my immediate assumption as an engineer. You start with prototypes and you build them up.
We know.
And I don't think the bent pyramid was a fucking mistake. I think that the bent pyramid was an attempt at a different form of engineering.
The Great Pyramid is just a fancy, overblown representation of the mountain of God, where Mount Olympus, where Zeus lives, where
Well,
Kronos,
yeah, but you can.
All of those live.
If you really want to represent Jupiter and power of Jupiter, what the fuck would you do? You'd connect to that electrical power, and then you'd worship the shit out of it. Every time you held up a cathode ray tube, you would a dendera bulb, you would be in concert with the Shangdi, with the Ra.
Right.
I mean, it's the best fucking. That's why our society is crazy. We use the force everywhere, and nobody's worshiping it at all. And that's probably sad for us if you really think about it. If you really stop and think about it. And we need it, because if it was gone, these people would, as the Joker said, these people would eat each other. And that's literally, which is sad to say. There's already jokes about the Civil War and Republicans, trolls, alt-right trolls making jokes about eating the left. It's funny, but it's also like gruesomely true.
Well, Aerosmith sings about eating the rich.
That's true, they do. Eat the rich. That's a good one. Robert.
And that might happen if things really go fucking to hell in a handbasket quick.
Yeah, I mean,
like if we turn into a mega depression, a worldwide mega depression, people are going to stand up and they're going to say, "We're hungry. Look at the rich. They got all this stuff. Let's go eat them."
Yeah, but that's only 1% of the population, so everybody else is going to starve after the rich are eaten.
Oh, well, not really. There's still animals and stuff.
Yeah, but human meat tastes so good. Did I say
that
loud?
Well, you know, they're trying to normalize cannibalism, right?
Yeah, they're trying to normalize. They successfully normalized cannibalism, in across the board. Apparently,
Soylent Green.
Yeah, they have Soylent Green. The name of the company is Soylent Green, and they sell protein that has been printed in drinks. Like they also sell. It's legal right now. Is one of the craziest times in the world to be alive, because you're legally allowed to use AI on children, facial recognition scan on everyone, anything you want. Pretty much. There's so many, like, think about this. In the 50s, there were so many illegal things that people were doing that you can't get away with now. In the 70s, there was so many illegal things that people were doing you can't get away with now because of forensics and technology. Now there's so many things that you can get away with that you won't get in trouble because it's legal. And there's just so many loopholes. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Well, before we have a full-blown discussion on the human flesh industry, which sounds like this is going, I would like to hear Robert commentate on the Great Pyramid Whether he decides to talk about the power plant or whether Robert wants to weigh in on the human sacrifice and the worshiping of Star and Jupiter and all that shit, I don't really care. I'm going to mute myself because I go in, there's all this traffic.
Right. Just as a background, I read a science fiction novel, or a fantasy history novel involving the pyramids back in the mid-1990s. It was secondhand. No, it would have been the 80s, mid-80s. It was a secondhand book. I went to the bookshop and found this thing, and the way it described what the pyramid was for was quite interesting. And 3 months after I'd read the book, I read a Japanese research group had managed to channel lightning using a laser beam some considerable distance through the atmosphere by ionizing it. So what the name Cheops comes from a naming convention used in the ancient past, where objects got named after the sounds they make. And if you were hearing a lightning discharge of high potential, you would hear "chop, chop" at a distance. It would sound like "kiop," but it's actually the lightning bolt hitting the top of the main large pyramid. So it had that sort of sound. Anyway, the explanation of what the pyramid was for was it was the ground tap of a lightning bolt strike. And if you look at the Giza complex, there's 3 large pyramids and 3 minor pyramids. And the 3 minor pyramids would have each had a laser beam that would have created a plasma trail through the atmosphere up into the ionosphere.
Not a laser, a maser. Closely similar.
Well, same thing. It's ionizing the atmosphere, and you get up into the ionosphere, and you've got now a plasma trail down which an electrical discharge can occur. And the capstone device on the pyramid was an energy capture. It was transformed into an RF frequency carrier wave on radio and just transmitted around the world for infinite power, basically. Now, the civilization was effectively an antediluvian civilization, like the Atlanteans or something along those lines. And what they had to do was replace all their building construction from framed metal buildings and things like that into stone constructions, because if you're transmitting power through an RF frequency, metal framed buildings will absorb that radio wave energy, and effectively melt. So I suspect that, yes, it was a massive power generator, and it probably did a few other things besides. I think.
Well, I do like this idea of using telluric currents, like Tesla said, RF communication around the world. I will say there is some interesting, I don't know if you want to call it hearsay or if you want to call it evidence, but there was a story conveyed to Lee. Now, Lee is, I think he's a very reputable man. First of all, he was a professor. He knows a lot of people. He was associated with Jim Michaels, who started the Ancient Kentucky. Lee has, of course, the Jolie Productions DVDs that people should pick up. That's Jole Productions. They're a bit expensive, but they're worth it, And there was a story that came out of South America that one of the Veracochans had been carrying one of those boxes, and he had done wonders for the locals. And I assume this was Peru, but I don't remember the detail, because getting a printed version of this is not easy or maybe even possible. But at some point, the people became angry with him, and they surrounded him. And he took some kind of wand, pointed it into the sky, and a vortex of well, it would have looked like fire, but the clouds began to swirl above him and come down towards him, and caught fire. Now, this is extremely hearsay, but it's not impossible in an electric universe to have this kind of control over the clouds. And so the question immediately arises of, how far did that science go? I mean, was it literally an on-off switch, or is this computerized? And B, I mean, what kind of DC power? And it reminds me of my interest to work with Aaron Harden and search for the key to electrifying and puttifying stone, because I don't believe that the Peruvian stuff is a polymer. I believe that those little things that are sticking out are where electrodes were hooked, and they would set a stone in place, puttify it, and then it would sink down and mold to the right shape, and then they would snap off the electrodes when it had cooled. But now finding the exact conditions for that to resonate, fortunately, the best of us for that is Neil. And Neil has never released that presentation he did about puttifying material to the public. He did a show with us in private on Electric View, and I've never seen the slides since. So I'm unable to source them, cite them, or anything. So if anybody's capable of getting Neil to release that, that'd be great. But I haven't been able to successfully get him to. But he insists it's actually quite easy.
So you're talking about instant fossilization?
No, different process.
No,
going the other way.
Softening stone through electric means. We get this. We hang on, Robert. We get this from Mongo Jup and his telling of the stories of the snakes carving out the rivers in Australia, and the people running up to the high spots, trying to get away from the snake that was carving the rivers. And you can, to this very day, see footprints, handprints, and fingerprints in the stone where they were running away from this thing. This thing.
And in Asia too.
Yeah, this plasma discharge that was happening, that was creating these Lichtenberg current shapes on the ground, was softening the stone itself, and that's where all of this comes from.
Yeah, it was turning stone into something that has the consistency of clay or putty. That's right.
I don't think it was turning it into anything. I think it was just electrically changing its frequencies to allow it to soften up, to allow the bonds between the electrons to break apart so that it could soften up.
Why do we have to complicate things? Occam's razor says that the clay was already soft, and then we put our hands in it. The clay was already soft, and then we put our feet in it.
So you have a good point. They could have in Peru. They could have shaped the walls, and then if it was some form of clay, instantly petrified it. But that would make it brittle, and that's the problem with that theory.
It's stone.
If you resonate the rock structure correctly, the crystalline structure, it won't necessarily fracture, but it will become malleable.
Mm-hmm.
And under those circumstances, the rock is still whatever it is, granite or limestone or whatever, but it's moldable. So
yeah, that's more or less what we're talking about. Is so you don't need a polymer.
No, you don't need a polymer, and you can finish the surface and create these joins that are really fine without too much trouble. If you can mold rock or stone shape it as you'd like to call it, Now, the pyramids,
Buddy has
not
a good
only
point. If
I-
there was a power source that someone was carrying, and there's a possible way to turn maybe there was a certain mixture in the clay, and then they used the power source to electrify that, you'd still end up with the 2 electrode attachments, and you'd still end up with the shape you need. So it's an interesting thing. But Neil's theory, or whoever's theory it was, Rick, I don't know. I just say Neil because he's the one who gave the presentation on electric view. But whoever it is, it still works around the same issues of cosmic rearrangement. Ultimately, we're talking about the cosmic rearrangement in the structured atomic model.
The process of getting this to work is you need to frequency resonate the rock, and that's going to require electromagnetic tools to do so. Whether it requires
perhaps
a pyramid power generator or not is another thing. But one interesting thing about the pyramids is I think it's Bosnia, there are a whole bunch of these of houses that have got a concrete floor, and there's a metal hearth located in one corner of that building that was literally pointing in the direction of the pyramid. So the claim is, if I've got a metal object and it's going to resonate with RF frequency, it will get hot, and you can use it for cooking and other things. The other thing that the pyramid definitely did was it produced atomic isotopes of whatever element you wanted, because the nuclear fusion process is electromagnetically driven. It's not the mainstream model for nuclear fusion and nuclear fission is warped. It's not correct.
Well, let's talk more about the Bosnian pyramids, because I want to go on the record and say Lee has been in them. Osmanovich has taken him in them, and they are 100% real. So Robert Schoch is wrong. And I know some insider scoop about why Robert Schoch turned on Osmanovich. And I'm not saying I don't trust Graham Hancock's crowd. I like Randall Carlson. I like Graham Hancock. But there is an ego that can develop in people who are in the alt stream who become successful. And when that happens, often when they don't get their way, when they're not treated like rock stars, this is what happened. He went up there to Osmanovich and began demanding he get comped for his flight, get comped for his hotel, be treated like a rock star, because he is in the alt stream a rock star. Robert Schoch is a huge name. And Osmanovich refused to do all of that. And that's when he turned on him. It had nothing to do with Osmanovich faking. He didn't fake any of that shit. And it's really sad.
It had to do with feeding his ego.
That's exactly, he refused to feed his ego, and that's why Robert Schoch turned. And it's probably going to piss off some diehards out there if they ever hear this show, that I would dare question the great Robert Schoch. But yeah, I dare question the great Robert Schoch, because he's a great geologist, and I respect him as a geologist. But I know from insider information that he did not behave with respect at the Bosnian pyramids. And the concrete that they were making there it's easily pre-Roman. It's not as good a concrete as we have today, but it was good enough for its time.
That's not the story, my friend. The concrete that they made there is better than concretes today. Even the high-tech concrete.
It's so old.
What?
Yeah.
No. They sent samples of this concrete to Italian labs, and it came back that it's far, far superior to anything that we do today.
Yeah.
I'd love to see those reports. If those reports are true, I would love to see them. And I don't know about
seeing the reports, but I'm just going off the information that Osmanovich puts out. I watched most of his videos, and I'm telling you, it's better than the concrete used today. It's more hydrophobic. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The concrete that was produced by the Egyptians and in the Bosnian pyramid was superior to the Roman equivalent by a long shot. And there was a program that used to be on the public broadcaster in Australia on ABC TV called Quantum, And they had a guy who was doing a PhD research into concrete building materials. And he had a bucket of sulfuric acid to age the concrete he was making. And he was adding to it other things like polymers to the concrete mix. But the thing that did the best job was fly ash. And he's got this in concentrated sulfuric acid, which is going to weather concrete pretty effectively. And he pulled out one of the blocks that he had in his little tank, and it hadn't suffered any damage whatsoever. So there are things you can add to concrete to make it far more stable and resistant to weathering than we realize. And given the constructional interest in what he was doing, I would say that there'll be patents on that stuff, and it will be under somebody's control.
What I want to add to this is that I went ahead and put the Bosnian pyramids and Gunung Padang into the Atlantean period in the timeline and on the origins of religions, which was the first EPMC paper, and it's not 100%, but it's still, that paper has held up better than one would think. It has been a really rock solid paper. And that's because I spent so much time actually looking at the dating for these megaliths. And these are, mega structures that existed antediluvian, and they are older than the Younger Dryas period. There's no doubt about it. The same thing happened in Gunung Padang. You have a scientist doing scientific work, getting it independently verified, and politics got involved. And by the way, Lee's been to that too. So Lee's been to the Gunung Padang. He's been inside the Bosnian pyramids. He's been to a lot of these rare locations that we discuss, and that's because he's older and he's got the time and the ability to do it. He lives in a historic home in the first place, and he's just a unique individual. And the little details that are at the Bosnian pyramids are way more fantastic than what's at Gunung Padang. What's interesting about Gunung Padang, though, is that they know there's a chamber, but because of politics, because somewhere along the line, American archaeology got involved, they won't let them actually probe it or penetrate it or, explore it. That sounds exactly like what's happening at the pyramids. So it's still part of this whole Egyptologist holding back the dam. And I cannot wait for the dam to break. There's already cracks in the dam because Graham Hancock excoriated Zahi Hawass over Göbekli Tepe, and it made a fool of him, because how could you not know that the world's oldest civilization site is now at Gunung Padang and not Egypt? But I think the Bosnian pyramids are 100% legit. I'm looking at the Antarctic thing with fresh and more open eyes. I'd like to see proof that it's not a mountain. However, it could be a mountain that is shaped by humans to resonate. And if it's part of a worldwide communications grid, that's fascinating shit to know. It's stuff worth knowing. We are biologically modern for at least 250,000 years, and we are possibly mentally modern for 40 to 100,000 years. And that depends on how you date things.
Ramon, I put a couple of links in the chat for you to go over later on. The first one is artificial concrete on the Bosnian, and then the other one is the search results for concrete on the Bosnian pyramid site. It came up with a bunch of different videos, so go through those and get caught up.
So in other words, you want me writing a bajillion more papers?
No, just get caught up on the Bosnian pyramid concrete, because it's far superior to anything that we can develop.
I swear to God, I was going just based on what I had seen, but then again, when you think of the age, any of our concrete would be way fucking worse. Now that I think about it,
Well,
Our
it says
sidewalks
here.
don't even last 50 years these
It
days.
says here. It says here. One of the videos, mechanical as excavation of super dense ancient concrete on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. So this stuff again is far better than anything that we can put together today. Even the high tech concretes, the super polymers and stuff that we got, this stuff was better.
Yeah.
Well, I am open to hearing it, and thank you for the potential correction. And if that's true, then I am open to being corrected on that statement. But I do know that they were real fucking pyramids. It's very obvious from the shaping. Yeah.
China has its pyramids, and the Communist Party have tried to hide it. But getting back to the story I was describing, the antediluvian civilization that built this power tap process suffered a catastrophic failure of the device.
Yes.
If you are able to tap the ionosphere for power, or in the manner that I'm talking about, you can suffer what's called an avalanche breakdown effect. And what that means is the ionosphere continues to discharge to the surface of the planet continuously.
Yes.
And when we understand that 100 seconds of power arriving at the ionosphere of the Earth is sufficient to stop the Earth from spinning, if you have a power tap that goes uncontrolled, you are going to potentially cause the electric ball motor that we have to tilt.
If we can line up a little bit more evidence, I would actually put together that paper, because I think I know. I think what happened was when Shamash died, it created one of these NASA simulated thunderbolts, the giant loops. And I think that it got into an overload in what's called a current short. And in a current short, so I don't know, some of you guys have worked with circuit breakers like a little bit, I mean, or maybe even extensively.
But you have to get on YouTube and look at those power substations they try to switch off.
Yeah. There's a thing that can happen even with residential circuit breakers. Most of the time what we experience is, a voltage overload, there's a switch. There's also a state where it gets into, which is a voltage short. And if you switch it, it makes a buzz sound and then it switches off again. But there is a third state that these breakers are designed for. And if it slams back and it does that over and over, about the third or fourth of these, you are starting to risk it exploding as hot as the surface of the sun or hotter in your face with the power of a small grenade, because of a current short is a mathematical condition where theoretically there is no end to the power it will draw. And of course, no source can do that. So essentially, it just creates this loop. And it can draw down, and it will create an explosion. If they were running their power plant off of birkeland currents coming from the North Pole down to the 30-degree latitude, if this local star Ra overloaded that by dying, all of that stuff could explode. I mean, there should be remnants of the electrum left, though, so I still recommend that it must be in the sands below.
Well, see, we forget about Tesla. People don't understand.
Can I finish the story? Right. So the had a pyramid close to one of the poles, and because it was going to maximize the power generation. But the risk was, of course, this avalanche breakdown could continue because the birkeland current could attach itself to the pyramid and just keep going until the pyramid had rotated sufficiently far out of alignment for the atmosphere to become an insulation mechanism again. And the tilt of the axis was around 30 degrees or so, which would explain the polar shift that Hapgood was talking about. Now, the interesting thing about that whole process is that the claim at the moment on the internet is that there's a pyramid on the Antarctic continent. And if that was a power generator of the sort, if this story was, it was put forward as real history in science fiction manner. So the question I had, the thing that got my attention with the story and kept it in my mind was the fact that these Japanese researchers with a laser beam technology had been able to direct an electrical discharge through the atmosphere. But the question I have here is, if the Earth is a ball motor and it comes out of its stability is compromised, what does the ball actually do in terms of motion on its axial spin, things like that? You know, is it going to produce
That's a good point.
the sort of energies required to either cause crustal displacement or the actual spinning axis moves relative to the surface? So in terms of a story, it was quite interesting. In terms of proving it, that'd be a bit difficult because I don't know how to get a ball motor working in the environment that the Earth apparently exists in. That'd be curious. But I did discover something on the weekend with the bolts and that experiment that I want to try and confirm. That if you've got a metal rod that's like an iron rod that's got rust on it, or has it got a thread on it, and it's at a certain length, because it's threaded and it's the right length, the metal bolt will behave like an LRC circuit. And all you need is a bit of magnet to get it to go. And I showed this to my colleague, and he got the multimeter attached to it, got the bolts. I hadn't wired them up yet for the copper wire inductor I'm going to put around it. But I had cardboard between the bolts and the magnet, and I put one probe of my voltmeter on one bolt and the other one on the other bolt at the other end. And what I was getting was gradually increasing millivolt DC current, DC voltage up to about 120 millivolts, and it fluctuated. It rose and fell. So it really means that we don't understand what's going on. But one of the things I'll observe about the thread is this was a 5/8 inch steel rod. I don't know the depth of the threading. I don't know the pitch of the threading, but the fact that it's a helical thread is important because electrons will travel the edge of the thread. So what's happening is that the magnetic eddy currents are inducing a magnetic motion mechanism on the electrons that move around the edge of the thread and go from one end of the bolt to the other. And because the bolt is the right length, the bolt forms the resistance, but the thread behaves like an induction and a capacitance at the same time. So you get a full-on LRC circuit with the bolt.
Well, I just wanted to go back to Tesla quickly for a second before you continue. People don't understand that they think that there's this magic wire out in the sky that he was using to gather electricity. No, I firmly believe that they're missing the big picture, and that being the potential between the ground and the air. That he found the connection, and he was using that potential. He was going deep into the ground, trying to find a flow of water, and we know that there's potential between the ground and the air, and the tower was up in the air. It was shaped around like a torus field, so it was magnetizing he was probably magnetizing by putting an electric current through the tower, magnetizing it and forcing electrons to flow into the torus field. I think that's how he was doing it. It's all about potential. this whole universe is built on potential.
Yeah. So what he actually
of
did
like
say,
of like charge and opposite charge.
what he
Now,
actually
people
did
don't
say,
understand.
I want to support you. What he actually did say is it is this is like basically a direct quote. It is no problem to generate whatever voltage you want. Hundreds of thousands of volts, millions of volts, no problem. That's what he said. I mean, paraphrasing, but he was adamant.
And what is voltage? It's potential.
Potential, exactly.
Exactly. And that's what people don't see the obvious. And it makes me crazy sometimes. I'm on the the Facebook Tesla site, and they're all, "We got this. We all understand what's going." No, apparently you don't.
No, and the point is, because he's also the inventor of the AC transformer, you can turn that whatever voltage into however much current you want. You just need the right amount of coils, and you need a cable thick enough to handle the amount. You know, it's harder to get a fuse or a resistor that can withstand the power level. What's his name? Photonic induction. He got a 3,000 amp fuse, and easily blew it up in his own apartment because he's crazy like that. And I mean, it was no problem for him. And when you look at his transformer, it didn't take too many windings. It just was the amount of the thickness of the cable that he used. Now we know it really isn't even really the thickness of the cable. It's if we could create more surface area in that cable, then he would be able to pass even more current through it. So that was the limit, the practicable limit. So what was expensive about the Wardenclyffe Tower is that he needed inordinate amounts of copper. It ain't the wood that was costing the money; it's all the copper. He needed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of copper.
Yeah, and if you up the frequency, what Robert was saying about the current traveling along the surface of the hair, or whatever, the fiber that was connecting the two bolts, makes perfect sense, because if you crank up the hertz rate of an electrical circuit, it will travel along the surface of anything that's there. It will just run along the surface. It won't penetrate in to your body, let's say. It'll just roll along your skin and keep going. That's the beauty of the ultra high frequencies. It
Well,
just goes on the surface.
Robert wants to correct your understanding of his statement.
Right. The bolt wasn't connected to anything.
No, you said there was a hair sticking off of the end of it.
No hair, no hair. What I said is I had a bolt. I've got two of them. I've got a 2.5 inch threaded bolt rod with 4 nuts on each, 2 nuts on each end to lock in the power. When I put the coil around, I'm actually going to connect the coil directly to the bolt at both ends. So I've got 2 bolts at both ends. So it's a 5/8 hex nut with a 5/8.
Well, you said something about rust, and then there was a hair or something between them.
No, there was no. That was a different. I have another piece of metal which is about 12 inches long, a bit longer, 14 inches, I think, and it has rust on the outside. Right, it's a steel rod, and a mild steel rod. But the bolts, I had a 2.5 inch one length and a 3 inch length, and the threading on the bolt is where it's on the edge of the thread that the electrical circuit is establishing itself, because it wants to travel on the outside of the surface. So you've got this very sharp edge running the entire length of the bolt. So if there's any electricity being generated by the magnet, it will be running on the edge of the bolt. But the bolts, the edge is a certain distance apart. So it's like an air gap capacitor as well. So you got the the electrical current running on the thread, on the edge of the thread, and between the threads you've got a gap which forms a capacitance, and then the bolt itself.
Well, you mentioned a hair or string, so I don't know.
No,
Anyways,
I didn't say anything about string, but the bolt itself produces the resistor. So the actual bolt is forming an LRC circuit, and what's activating that circuit is a neodymium, 2.5-inch neodymium circular magnet with a hole in the center, and it's oscillating, and it'll slowly rise due to inductance and capacitance to a given voltage level.
Oh, but have you proven that it will do that, or is this your conjecture?
No, I've watched it do it.
You've watched it. Well, have you videoed it?
Yeah, I will video it. I haven't got that far yet.
Okay.
So,
Well, I want to see. I just want to see.
So all I'm saying is that's the effect that occurred, and the best explanation I have for the phenomena is that the bolt, due to its geometry of construction, is an LRC circuit effectively in and of itself. With the 14-inch metal bar, the rod I had, which is rusted on the outside, I put that on the magnet, and when I put it in the center, there was hardly any effect at all. It was like nothing really much. But when I put the magnet at one end of the rod, and the rod was center aligned on the magnet, I was able to develop a 140 milliamp voltage across the rod. And my colleagues had said, well, the rust is actually enabling it to become a capacitor and an inductor at the same time. So, because it's got rust on the outside, so you've got a different compound. So you've got different materials involved in it. But this is for mild steel, which is magnetic. But the interesting thing is I had the 1.1 meter length, which is 3 feet or so. Still, the threading rod, I bought 2 1 meter ones, and when I put the 1 meter on it and did the same thing that I'd done with, this is brand new, no nuts on the end or anything, put it on the magnet structure and put the voltage probes at each end, nothing, 0 volts. And the reason being is the length of the metal, being 1 meter, is more resistance than, so the electrical circuit isn't able to develop a resonance and isn't able to charge up because the resistor just gobbles up whatever's being produced. So there's a geometry involved in this construction where, based upon the threading that occurs and the length and and everything that's involved, if you can tune the bolt correctly, you'll get something quite interesting effects. And I'm pretty sure that nobody else has documented this sort of behavior other than in the videos that Ramon was talking about being clickbait.
I want to go back to... I want to
there, Ramon.
Pyramids. We were talking about... 1 second, Andy. We were talking about crustal formation. I want to go through some mechanisms on that. Andy, did you have something?
No, all I was going to say was that experiment, Rob, came out of that last year when you had that professor, whatever he called himself. He was using the LEDs on some and bolts on others and claiming he could get free power.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear some of the results you're starting to get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suspected there was something to it, but the one where I think he's an Indian guy doing it, where he puts the copper wire around the bolt and hooks it up to an LED light and does all that fancy stuff. The suspicion that there's a reed switch and a 9-volt battery inside the light, I think, carries some degree of weight. So yeah, there may well be a bit of trickery going on there, but if what I'm doing is indicative of something, then there might be a lot more to it than we realise.
Well,
they may
I
even be
don't
used
disagree with that at all. I mean, based on DeCinty's theory of surface edge currents, with the kind of power that was on display there,
Was beyond. Well, as I said to
guarantee you there's trickery. Guarantee you there's trickery.
I'd need for it to get to work properly with the voltage readings I was getting. Yeah, I'd need 90 of these configurations just to get to 9 volts. So it's not like it's a simple thing to do.
Yeah, but if you put them together or like basically had them side by side on them, you could possibly find that over time you get a multiplier increase too, Rob.
Yeah.
Well, I want to push back a little. How good a meter are you using? Like, what category is it? Is it a cat?
What?
Is it cat 4 or is this a cat 2 meter?
It's
Look on the back. It'll tell you.
Cat QM.
Yeah.
1530.
The problem is you're never going to get beyond 100 milliamp precision with a cat 2 meter. You need a cat 5 meter. Really want super precise or an oscilloscope.
Yeah. Well, my solution to that, short of the grand's worth, thousands of dollars worth of oscilloscope, is analog DC and millivolt ampere analog devices.
Yeah, I'm not blaming you. I'm just letting you know, like, unfortunately, you won't know whether you're seeing 40 milliamps or 140 milliamps. It's just impossible because those meters, they don't have that kind of precision. They're designed for essentially residential electric use, and that's it. Like work on cars and work on houses. A Cat 2 is not a very high grade meter. It's not
Well, this doesn't talk about Cat 2.
You said it's a Cat 2M.
No, I said it's a Cat.
Yeah, Rob?
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, I got a side comment here, which is great news. Great news for the Electromagnetic World Expo we're having. Probably my favorite, highest, well, next to Don Scott and Dan Winter, which I'm not sure if Dr. Scott or Professor Scott's going to be doing a video or not. But that being said, Hartmut Mueller, who is the Interscaler, if you look up his page on YouTube, Interscaler, I've done a show on it. By far the best geometry, mathematics of the cosmos from the large to the small. He's amazing. He's had COVID for the past 3 weeks, and he had laryngitis, and he couldn't do any recording. And but his wife or his girlfriend just got back with me, which always seems to be these guys' secretaries, which is cute. Wish I had one. Just kidding. I already did, and I don't wish I had one. But appetition is Leibniz referred to appetition in the monadology as the bridge of the small to the infinite. Now, this appetition is exactly what this Hartmut Mueller has nailed. He fucking nailed it, dude. If you watch his video, Interscaler, it's phenomenal. It's just like, I can't believe no one else is talking about this. I stumbled upon this guy years ago, and like I said, he just had laryngitis, but now he's going to be a speaker, so that's all.
Okay. So Robert had brought up that powerful plant affected by a birkeland current, that there could have been an overdraw, and that may have actually caused or been implicated coincidentally in a buckling of the crust. And I wanted to
Yes.
talk about different mechanisms where that's possible. So I'll introduce the first mechanism. Professor Mayle, who is infamous for having created an interesting medical device that uses Tesla coils to transfer medical data remotely through what he thinks is scalar magnetic waves, but I think there's just Birkeland currents. He thinks that it's possible that every time that there's a supernova event, that Earth gets a shower or smatter of neutrino energy, and that it gets trapped inside the Earth's core, which makes me think of heavy water and of the waters that have been coming out of the mantle. And that when that happens, that there's basically a ballooning effect. Distinti thinks that there are hotspot ether connections, which again goes back to plasma and Birkeland currents, going through each of these hotspots that are in the center of crusts, and that it creates a sort of a bubbling up effect. And then when the current shuts off, then the crust wants to crack and settle, and that could explain the sinking of islands and continents. So, what other mechanisms are we willing to talk about?
That could explain the hot spots too and volcanism.
That's exactly what he's not. It's not could. That's what he's saying.
Another mechanism of a deforming crust is a body coming close to the planet,
right?
Pulling, tugging on
correct
crust, as in the capture of the moon, as in Mars approaching the Earth 12 times in the polar configuration column.
Right.
That would have caused a lot of problems. But
that's
if we're talking about before that, we're talking about the expansion of the Earth.
Right.
And we're talking about areas of the Earth being depressed because of that expansion, and other areas being raised.
Yes.
And all the while, we're getting thunderbolts intermittently hitting the Earth, resculpting everything, making a mountain range over here, digging out stuff over here. Could look like deposition of the ground by raising or lowering of the ground. That could make it look like that as well, quite possibly. That's just my 2 cents.
Getting back to the electricity stuff.
If I could, real quick, I just got to ask Ramon for something. I cannot find your presentation. I've gone through, and the one that you did send me that was questionable, that you didn't know, it's not it. It's not the right presentation. I've downloaded it twice. So if we could either re-record sometime this week, I'm slamming on everything for this expo, for the World Expo. So this week, I'm slamming on it nonstop. I'm writing a to-do list right now. So let me know.
I'll look first on the computer at home first, because I really have a visceral rejection of going through another 45-minute presentation again. My body is not having it. So we'll see. I'll see what. But anyway,
I think the date was 5/28, 5/31, right around there. Because that's what I'm seeing on your other presentation. Was if it was the same day.
No, they weren't done the same day. They were done different dates. But I'll just have to try and look again. As going back to mechanisms, I want to piggyback on. There's a mechanism that is similar to what Rick is mentioning, and it's the same electrotidal pull that the moon and we have, and that there could be a very sudden uplift, especially if there's a direct arc connection. There can be a sudden localized, and but there could, of course, Rick is not wrong. There could be a very generalized uplift of the crust. The whole thing could be buckling. But according to the Bible, it was almost as if something was passing over and making individual hills and mountains lift, and as it said, jump and skip like lambs. And that's in the Psalms. So there's some kind of a direct connection that's happening that is causing individual, and that makes me think of course, Patagonia. I think it's like the smoking gun for this.
Or the Andes as well.
Well,
That's
don't
where
forget,
Patagonia is.
don't forget,
Can I-
huge amounts
can I
of
just-
sounds were coming off of these events as well. Ultrasounds, in fact, I would
Well, you would have got
say,
sounds across the whole.
but ultrasounds at really, really high power ranges that would make shit move around.
Yeah. So Patagonia is in the Andes. That's what we're talking about. And there are mountains there in Patagonia with sudden upthrust. And there are values for these upthrusts in the kilometer ranges in some places. And it's also downthrust. And these are from the book, The Day the World Almost Died, something like that. And
Well,
I put that table in the Unboxing Atlantis paper. So if you want to find it and know those values for the upthrust and downthrust and where they are, and poor Jimmy, it's not the Rakat.
yeah. Well, see, Teotihuacan was originally at 3,500 feet above sea level. Now it's 15,000 feet. So it was raised big time. And 12,900 years ago ish. Not that long ago.
In that story I was describing of the catastrophe trigger, what caused the avalanche breakdown to switch on and stay on was that a spacecraft was in orbit and it had ion thrusters, and it activated its thrusters at the time a shuttle was being launched, and the shuttle had people on board. So the operators, you get the conditions for an avalanche breakdown occurring. You got a craft that's got lots of living people on board, as it were, and the operators of the power plant say, oh, we've got a shuttle launch, we can't switch off the power, but you have to switch off the power, otherwise we've got a problem. And the guys on the spaceship that are getting ready to go on an interstellar voyage are repositioning their craft so they can take off. And because of the argument between the superior and the technician, the power didn't get switched off. You should have lost the shuttle and all the rest of it, but it didn't happen. And so the result was the shuttle makes it to orbit. The Earth suffers a crustal displacement, and the antediluvian civilization gets snotted in the process. And the people on the spaceship and the shuttle get to watch that disaster unfold. But the avalanche breakdown, according to the book, lasted for about 6.5 minutes. And that's a lot of power. If we're talking every 100 seconds, enough energy to stop the Earth from spinning, and we're talking 6.5 minutes worth of energy, what it would do to the Earth in terms of local devastation would be quite curious. I'm reading here also, just for the audience's understanding, as you go up in altitude, you gain 100 volts per meter at the surface. So as you go up, your electrical potential increases. So the higher up you go, the bigger the potential. And the atmosphere is acting as an insulator to a capacitance mechanism.
And I want to
add
piggyback that the sun's solar grains are each 10 volt per grain. So you have this consistent feeding of potential to the Earth.
Yeah. So you've got.
I want to add to that. Oh shoot! Now I've got my train of thought.
Sorry. You also got about 2 picoamps per square meter of on the surface of the Earth in terms of this energy levels. But the other thing that was, when we're talking about volcanic melts, if you can focus a magnetic pole in a location, the rock will melt. There are videos on the YouTube about using neodymium magnets to melt metal, but you've got to focus that magnetic field structure to create a magnetic pinch point where the metal has got to be located for it to melt.
I remembered.
So, yep, I'm done.
You have to remember that 100 volts of potential between the ground and the sky. That's just on the surface of the ground. Dig deeper, isolate that cable, go a couple hundred yards deeper, or a couple miles deeper, make the connection down there. You're going to find that potential has just jumped massively.
Well,
I mean, absolutely massively. And if you can get a flow of water to run over that connection, you've just hit the jackpot.
What we want to talk about is Hajim Theory.
What I'm saying is the electric circuit that's in the ground is due to the plasmoid that's at the center of the Earth.
All right, I knew where you were going, Rick. I knew. So let's get into Hajim Theory and the plasma electromagnetic sky, and I'll just start it off with this. So you have the spheres of heaven and the spheres of Earth, and what's in between is ironically a solid. And then that's not the way it should be according to science, right? It should go. You should have the air, then the liquid, then the solid. But that's not what happens. There are spheres below us and spheres above us, and there's a sudden shift between all of them, which implicates that there's an immediate capacitance. And I think that's what you're saying that Tesla saw. So let's talk about the plasma electromagnetic sky. Let's talk about the Hajim, the hollow, expanding, growing electromagnetic Earth. You want to start at the core, it sounds like. So what evidence do you have for a plasmoid core?
Well, the disconnection from Saturn, the connection then to the sun caused the expansion of the Earth.
Okay. Right, so the continual pressure is what you're implying,
and that excess energy had to do something to the plasmoid and the material that the plasmoid created surrounding it, or that was surrounding it during its creation, basically during the Earth's creation. It was a thunderbolt pinched down. Well, not a thunderbolt, but it was matter pinched down. In the Earth's a failed star, just like Jupiter, just like Saturn. But it was pinched down too close to Saturn, and it became a rocky body instead of a star.
Okay, so my personal theory at this moment for the Hajim theory is still that there is some form of condensed easy water, Polak heavy water in the core. It may be acting as a plasma. I don't see it as a plasmoid. I see it as a storage. It's capable of some type of energy storage. And this way, I agree with Professor Mail. I don't necessarily think it has anything to do with neutrinos. It may, but I don't think so. But that there is a vine of energy coming off of stars that connects into our poles, and it continuously provides this mechanism for both expansion and literally it's growing because material is being dumped here.
Yes, we know the birkeland currents, they feed both the north and south poles of each planet that they are in contact with, or each sun that they're in contact with.
Exactly. And when we look at Enceladus, it's so-called cryovolcanoes. So it has nothing to do with heat. These electrical connections between Saturn and Enceladus, the water is reacting to the birkeland currents there. So why wouldn't it react inside the Earth, especially if it's rearranged in sort of an HHO manner, or Polak's easy water. We know that the water that's coming up through the bottom there, the Gulf of Mexico, where there's been an obvious gash and rupture along the seabed there, that some has leaked up, and that water is toxic. It is not something that animals and life can live in. It's heavy too. It sits at the bottom of the ocean.
It just
Well-
depends on how acidic it is. What
No,
In
it's
terms
a
of-
different form of water. It's not the kind of water that life it rests like at the bottom as if it's a silt.
Prime
In
water.
Oh yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Mexico. Yeah.
There's something called
Any-
prime water that that Walter Russell was describing. Prime water and pre-water. Like there's another name for it as well. I'm not sure if anyone here knows this, but the discovery of heavy water was due directly to Walter Russell. A conversation that he had in the New York Times with another scientist. This is how he earned his doctorates. He got an earned doctorates by writing to us in the New York Times on how to discover heavy water. Then they followed through with it and gave him a doctorates for discovering heavy water.
That's pretty cool. I'd love to see just an article or something, not because I doubt it, but I mean, I'd love to
Was that-
learn that.
Well, when you say heavy water, what do you mean, buddy James? Because heavy water's been around for a long time. Deuterium water they've been using it since the 20s and 30s on nuclear programs in the
Right.
laboratories and stuff, because it doesn't it's
Walter
got a higher
Russell,
vaporizing temperature.
Walter Russell produced a periodic table of elements, a spiral periodic table of elements that showed that the inert gases were actually deuterium and other elements, transuranium elements as well. The nuclear bomb is pretty much could be accredited to Walter Russell because he predicted and named all the transuranium elements. There's a whole shit ton of elements that everyone agreed didn't existed, but according to his model, it did exist. So he
What year are
predicted
you
that-
talking about? Because Nikola Tesla was talking about the atomic bomb back in 1920.
Yeah,
Well,
Walter
that's
Russell was
because
around-
they were running
Walter Russell was around
experiments.
back then.
Hold on, let Buddy answer. What year are you talking about?
What year did Walter Russell create his chart and predict the transuranium
Yeah.
and
What
elements?
when are we
He
talking
might
And
about?
the heavy,
He might
And the
not have been
heavy-
the first person to predict it, but they didn't even name any of the elements that he named and he showed in his charts and his geometry. They didn't attribute it to any of the names that he named them.
Well, I don't have any reason to doubt you. I just want to know what era we're talking about.
I think he had his vision in 1921. And he was
Okay.
49. So
Yeah.
in the
If you
20s.
find some documentation, I'd love to, and then that could go up on the gateway. I would love to see this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I can send you
well,
some.
if we're talking heavy water, you're certainly in the right range in terms of discovering tritium. But yeah, so a lot of the nuclear physics stuff was discovered in the late, well, probably when they started playing with cathode and anode rod tubes, which is what the 1880s forward. But a lot of it was ignored. So it wasn't until the late 1910s, like 1917 or so, after the First World War, that you started to see speculations about protons and other similar emissions. So yeah, isotopes and things.
But I want to
So
make
you-
clear
A university in the United States in the 1920s set up the first quasi-nuclear reactor for experimentation for those purposes, Robert.
when I want to be clear.
But
When I say heavy water, I'm not talking about nuclear, fission related processes. When I say heavy water, I'm talking about a water that is denser than ocean water, which is already dense because it has salt in it and it's at high pressure down there. So we're talking about something is coming up through the mantle from the core, and this is a fact. It really is coming up. They've actually sampled this shit, and it's just denser. It rests at the bottom of the ocean. So when I say heavy water, I'm not talking about capital H,
Yeah.
capital W. I'm
Yeah.
talking about water that's just physically heavier than ocean water. How related that
was
is,
my
or it's
confusion.
useful, it could be useful in a nuclear fission process. That might be possible. And I'm sure Gerald Pollack has something to say about the bridging of these two subjects, but that's not what I was talking about.
I wonder if Professor Pollack has worked with deuterium water and found out if it has similar properties as H2O.
Well, they're different species. No, there will be effects that are similar, but they won't be identical.
No, I'm saying
anyway.
whether or not it forms another type of easy water
matrix, another matrix.
Well, whether if it's against the surface, it takes the charge away. It takes electrons away from the surface that it's touching, like easy water does with hydrogen and oxygen. I'm curious as to whether hydrogen and deuterium do the same thing, or does it not do that? That's my question.
I think one of the critical elements of this whole thing, and this is the discussion I was having with my colleague on Saturday, is that we think nuclear processes in terms of chemistry, the formation and transmutation of elements, and chemistry as such are nuclear processes. They're not what mainstream chemistry calls it. That's not true. That their model's not correct. The structured atom model requires the ability to have electrical and magnetic impact on terms of transforming and growing elements in a tree, like a fractal arrangement. But one of the things we were discussing is varieties of compounds. One of the critical compounds that you get is the hexagonal ring structure. So elements that will create a combinational elements that will create a hexagonal ring. Carbon will do it, but there are double bonds. There are 3 single and 2 double bonds that swap locations. Boron and nitrogen will form a hexagonal ring of single bonds. And the boron nitride is actually geometry for solids is actually stronger than diamond and not as brittle. Beryllium boride will form hexagonal rings. They also form buckyballs and things like that. But the hexagonal structures has some very interesting properties. So where you can get a multiple that involves 3 or 6 or 9, you're going to get these hexagonal mechanisms occurring in the compound structure. So you can form a hexagonal ring, and that will change the stability of the material that is generated, and it can be quite hard and it can be quite resilient, and these rings have incredibly interesting electromagnetic properties that haven't been really examined well in civilian science.
I agree.
Not to say that.
I agree. So then I guess what we haven't done yet is talk about the plasma the spheres of heaven, because we're all implying that there's kind of action inside of the spheres of Earth, but we haven't talked about the spheres of heaven, and then we haven't talked about the Earth as a transformer yet. I think we should get there.
If you look at that right off of what Robert was saying real quick.
We'll let Robert finish his thought, and then yeah.
If we apply Robert Tilley's hexagonal model for the photosphere and apply it to the Earth, you can get a shell structure of hexagonal compounds inside a gaseous or a plasma environment, and that will give you a shell, the spheres of the heavens. And inside the Earth, the model I have is a transuranic ball in the center with a series of 4 shells under the crust, the 4th one being at the current radius of the Earth, but there was a potential for a 7th shell further out, and this is this hexagonal compound mechanism of these crystalline structures of the elements out of the first row of the periodic table. And if we're talking boron nitride hexagonal arrangements and beryllium boride and other similar structures with diamond and hydrogen and boron involved, you are going to get semi-rigid disks or ovoids that are circular, and depending on the rate at which those shells form and the accretion rate of interstellar dust in planetary formation, you can have large voids between these shells, because the first shell is about 1,500 meters, the next one's at I think it's 3,200, then 6,400, 70 something, 7,500, somewhere in these numbers. What you do is you get the neutron decay and you work out their half-lives and the speed and at what point the neutron's going to disintegrate, and it'll form hydrogen that will then go through a proton capture mechanism and create heavier elements as they go. So you'll get these shells occurring at a distance where the neutrons decay, and there's a set geometry for them, which would explain why some of the planetary diameters that we're seeing for the rocky planets, for example, are at the sizes they are. And if we're talking about some sort of electrical energy input into a plasmoid, you need a conduit mechanism to get down through the surface of the planet into the plasmoid itself. And there's lots of claims that there are polar holes and things like that. So, but we definitely know that there's electrical connections inside the Earth as well as through the crust. And if you've got magnetic fields that are doing pinch point melting of rock, rock has a high metallicity in it. You know, it's full of metals, so it'll become conductive, particularly if it's molten and if you've got water involved. So you're going to get all sorts of weird results. So there could be large voids inside the Earth that we can't see, and it would certainly explain some of the weird seismic results that we get. But big impacts, you know, these thunderbolts and actual physical hits will crack those shell mechanisms. So I've only got hearsay evidence to say that the shell theory that I've got is correct, but one of the hearsay confirmations is underneath the crusts of the continents is the remnants of one of these shell structures that's been fractured. But yeah.
So taking all of what you said into consideration and some of what you were talking about before, I've recently gotten back into Faraday's model of the atom and how it's all based off of vortex loops, vortex rings, and this geometry of these vortex rings reminds me a lot of what you were talking about, the basic structure of the atom, and how it's connected to larger scale electrical strings and geometries and phase transitions. To me, it seems like anytime anything goes through a phase transition, it's a plasma morphology for sure. Most of the time it's a plasma morphology, and plasma changes into everything, all living creatures. So these morphologies, these plasma morphologies, are on every scale break down in a beautiful geometric way. Just like what's his name? Pollock, Gerald Pollock.
Yeah, they create galaxies on the largest scale.
Yeah. And some of the clearest photos of galaxies, which I don't believe because it's probably artists drawing them, the newest ones, they look identical to fractal cosmology. They're literally the bar Milky Way galaxy. It looks like it was used like a fractal generator generated the image, and then NASA's saying it's a real image. That's how fractal they are. That's how recursive they are. the recursion of the geometry over and over and over is what produces power, because nature breeds and it thrives on novelty, but everything's always changing. So that novelty is preserved, and it's changing. So it's like, what do fractals do best? They multiply. They give birth. All living systems are fractal. So what do fractals do best? What is the purpose of life? To reproduce, to create more of itself. You look at all the dogs, fractal. Humans, fractal. Brain, fractal. Fractal electric brain connected to the larger electric brain, fractal. Everywhere you look, it's fractal. And that's the roughness of scales and the breakdown of chaos into simple patterns, orderly patterns that are repeating themselves. And then you go ahead.
In terms of fundamental constructional requirement, I still think the basis geometry that is needed is the simplex, which means our universe is nested spaces immediately as a result. But what's important in the simplex is the node points of the simplex, the points around the structure, where the centroids are located of the various elements, and where the nodes are located. Because from the nodes of the simplex and the centroid, you can create all the polygonic shapes, the platonic solids, all those regular polygons. They're all come from that tetrahedral nodal structure. And the only other, even the cube can be generated directly from the nodal interaction of a tetrahedron to produce a cube structure. So if I interlock two tetrahedrons so that their centroids are a specific distance apart, I will get a cube. And there's all sorts of weird stuff that goes on. So the geometry of construction, I think the fundamental element is the tetrahedral and the simplex model. And I think the way things are constructed is fractal geometry based upon those two structures, because everything generates from them. And there's a resonance mechanism, a transfer energy mechanism that occurs because of the geometry and the way it behaves. So it means that pretty much matter itself is a living thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because the power of numbers is in a place to control the force. That's the way I've arranged the diagram, because I agree there's some guidance that has to come to why the force is behaving differently at different structure levels. And we divide it up into lots of different properties: superconductivity over here, van der Waals forces over here, cavitation over here. But the reason that it appears different is because of the fractal nature and the rearrangement that happens. And I think that's a very important position in the table, and it occupies the metal position. You'd think that the metal position would be where the force lies, but it lies at the wood position because of the filamentary behavior of mu. Mu is the concept of filamentation throughout the entire universe, and how these different powers really contain and control each other and resonate with the Fibonacci is so fascinating, endlessly. Did we really finish the plasma, the spheres of heaven discussion yet? I mean, it seems no. I feel like we were still kind of more focused on the Hajim.
Really. All I was saying is that the spheres of heaven, when I get a tetrahedron and I turn it inside out, in other words, I move my vertices and centroids in such a manner as that they reverse their location. So the centroid's on the outside and the nodes are on the inside. I get an ovoid structure, which is almost spherical. And there's a relationship between that structure and the helix. And the helix is the only motion mechanism in our universe that's outside of a diagram. And we misinterpret things because we're living on a system on a planetary surface and we think it's stationary. We make an immediate observational assumption that's wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so now we have our spheres of heaven. They're of course moving. There's a video, it's a time-lapse footage of a guy, where he worked on ships, and you can actually watch these spheres in time-lapse move across each other. It's really beautiful. And so you have these different spheres. They're moving at different rates. They have different, quote, windings. And then you have the spheres inside the Earth, similar thing. And then here we are in this membrane that's full of lots of different kinds of chemistry, where a lot of different, basically, interactions can go, experiments. New species are being created, other species are dying out. We're having interesting effects of the changes that we sense each day. And then of course it has to be able to ripple, and it's going to ripple, it's going to buckle, and it may take a long time or it may happen in a short time. But power is being stored and generated, and that goes back to Bruce Leybourne's stellar transformer argument. And you have to wonder how much the Earth can take, like what's its tolerance level, because every machine has a tolerance level. At what point does it become overloaded? Of course, the Great Pyramid was just 1/10,000th, I think, of the diameter, something like that. I can't remember what the exact ratio was, but it is a ratio. So it's receiving that power level down, and then it is itself a statement of power, regardless of whether it's a power plant. It is a statement of power around social power, political, economic power. And then here we are down below that, observing this. Plus, we have all these electrical effects bubbling up inside of our consciousness from our cells and spirit and everything coming up. And now we're finding out that it appears that the ether itself is ebbing and flowing, that there is an ebb and flow. Plus, the Earth is following the sun. The sun is going up and down around the Milky Way at a certain rate, and then maybe going around with the Pleiades around the filament. So there's all these oscillations that are altering the frequencies and creating transformative properties via induction. And then with the spheres, they have natural spherical capacitance. So, and then of course, everything has some resistance unless it's in a superconductive state. So here we have a circuit once again. So I guess the question is, why aren't we just tapping that circuit?
Well, we don't know how to do it, which is probably at the moment a good thing. The Schumann
potential. It's potential. All you have to do is be able to tap potential, and we know how to do it. So it's not that we don't know how to do it.
We sort of do
tapping it.
It's the will. It's the will.
One at a time, guys. One at a time. Let everybody jump on Robert. Let him finish his point.
This is electric universe architecture. We've been doing this for a long time. If you look at the Tibetan designs of some of the houses and buildings and constructs, you look at the Native American designs of their buildings, of some of the teepees and how they lived. You look at everything, and throughout the history, it shows that that based on the architecture, it seems as though as above, so below, we've been building our buildings to tap into this energy already.
Well,
okay, well, let me be more specific.
And all the rest of it.
But when modern world.
I just wanted to get into what Ramon was describing with these interactions. Is you're getting a series of Schumann resonance structures occurring in our local region, and when I say region, think about it in terms of the galactic scale. All the way down to the picometer scale where atoms live. There's a resonance mechanism that's feeding the entire system, and everything is responding to all the frequencies involved. Our DNA is an antenna for electrical resonance or electromagnetic resonance. So the change, how fast can a system change? Well, we know with biological systems, they reach a tipping point. In other words, you can add, and then suddenly there's a dramatic instantaneous change. So I think what you get is a slow, gradual build up to the point where it will tip, and it either discharges or it tips, and when it tips, the transformation is very rapid. And when I say rapid, we're talking hours, within hours, because what you're describing in mythology is the sun standing in the middle of the sky for 36 hours, for a day and a half, just didn't move. So something's occurred. So there's a transformation on the Earth where the rotation of the Earth and the location of the sun just basically locked. And on the other side of the planet, when you check the myths, there's a time where darkness occurred for a day and a half. So these events can occur, and probably in terms of time limit for the Earth, maybe it's 12 hours transition time.
Okay.
So the question is, for other planets, the Earth is part of a system, it's connected. Other planets would have suffered similar sorts of transformations.
Okay.
But
my question was, let me reiterate, why are humans, modern humans, not utilizing this more directly?
Well,
I'm setting you guys up. This is basically open-ended,
Well, my
you guys
view
have-
is had a catastrophe and corruption mechanism kick in, and it's gone out there and basically decimated the old knowledge, and it's got to be rebuilt.
Okay. All right, fair enough. So you don't see it as a conspiracy, you see it as an effect of the catastrophe upon our psyche.
And corruption of our psyche as well. So there's
Corruption,
two
the
elements.
corruption of the psyche. Is it the DNA is also corrupt, or just the psyche?
No, the behavior has become corrupt.
Okay.
And whether that's due to an external influence or what, I don't know. The result of the catastrophe, possibly. But
the bottom line is people don't want to worship the big G mechanism.
Yeah, but the environment that we live in is going to reset and get rid of the corruption, because it's damaging life systems, and the universe doesn't tolerate damaging life systems.
Well, and on a spiritual level, if everything's on a spiritual circuit, our behaviors, if they're aberrant and not in accord with that circuit, would be the equivalent of a fuse. And a sudden surge in etheric or spiritual energy could absolutely burn out that fuse. And anybody who's not getting with the program gets basically selectively removed.
Or reset.
Or reset per force, which I have had patients who have been suddenly introduced to the upper worlds. They were normal people one day, and the next day they're not allowed to be that way anymore. That does happen. It's unusual, but it's pretty interesting. I get a lot of really interesting cases like that. But okay, so we've got our spheres of heaven. They're moving differentially with the spheres of Earth, like literally different rates. Plus, they're within themselves. They have different shells, different capacitance, different rates. And then you have all this weather that is the physical expression of the changes of the law of flux or evolution. So the Chinese just called it wind. They kept it really simple. With us, we have several words for this daggone thing. So where do we go from there? Because now we have our power. We have our P power. We've got a couple of the laws defined. Then we were talking about the power numbers. You guys were talking about fractal geometries in this case. And then we talked about the force. We briefly talked about the ether, but isn't it funny? We always these days seem to save the Lord for last. And then shouldn't it be first, because it's in the fire position? And the consciousness and this one consciousness being a part of it. And I want to bring up Michael Claridge's amazing video, a very poetic video about the consciousness of stars. So I think that we should, wax a little philosophical, get whimsical if you like. I don't care, futurization. But we should talk about consciousness's effect. And maybe is the solar system a big family? Or is it political? Is it a kingdom?
Ramon,
Now,
I was thinking about this last. I was thinking about this last night, and I, as you know, go down the rabbit hole. I stare into the abyss. I study what it is.
Yes.
So I haven't heard anybody that goes deeper, and I'm not bragging. I'm just like, I'm lucky that I haven't succumbed to the abyss, because it's hard to get in and out of it.
Yes.
It doesn't deal well with mental issues, or if you have any mental illnesses, it can cause mental illnesses and death. But
That's right.
that being said, I went real deep last night, and what I was trying to understand is what is the purpose of all of this? Okay, let's say this is where my thought was. Let's say the entire universe, as we know it, everything, as we know it, is just a joint in something twisting, and it's just the grease, and we're just the atomic molecules of this twisting. So that's how small things are. But there's an outside of this twisting rope, and is it just like the inside of a leg of an animal moving, and that's what our whole universe is? Because there's something bigger on the outside, and that goes back to Leibniz's theory of talking about the appetition and the monadology, the bridge between the infinitesimally small to the cosmologically large. The edges have to meet. The alpha has to meet the omega. The beginning and the end can be thought of on scales of measurement and metric, and I don't think that we can start talking about. I guess we can start talking about consciousness whenever we want. We can do it all day long. But I think that it's important to be able to connect the membrane of the micro to the macro, and this is done. This is done and has been done by so many different scientists, one after another. But I can't get my mind off of the knot. If anybody here in this group has studied knot theory, and the braiding of loops, seems like
that's all homologies. That's what that's study of homology. And, and you can categorize all sorts of numbers by studying the shapes that the number system sort of creates, the loops that they make.
So this is homotopy type theory.
Yeah.
And it all breaks down to, mathematically, it all breaks down to cobordisms, which is just the tying of a loop of a torus, the twisting of a torus in figure eights. I believe that I've known for a while, but now talking with this group and understanding more and more about the cosmos, I found yesterday the mechanism for what creates double layers, and why it creates the hexagonal and different types of polytopes.
So you're talking beyond what Gareth is describing about, the stream goes this way and then it goes this way and then they start to fold back on themselves. You're talking about the entire mechanism. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I discovered this last night, and then I started having visions, and like I started to understand that there is, well, without getting into chirality,
well, why not?
Well, we are these a male and a female sexed mated pairs of opposites, getting right down to Russellian taxonomy. This is what you got to be a naturalist. Okay, so all of my favorite thinkers are all naturalists. They observe and they go out in nature and they understand things and they study this. So
Thank you.
Russell was the same way. You're welcome. And this is a very successful route of taking in the information and disseminating it and explaining it,
Yes.
studying nature.
Yes.
So
you're going to tell us the mechanism or what? I mean,
yeah, it's a figure 8.
an analemma. Okay.
Yes, an analemma. Exactly. My mind went exactly to analemma, but I forgot how to pronounce it. And that's what we see in the fucking sky, dude. It's showing us exactly what it's doing.
Right.
The entirety of it is an analemma on all scales.
Okay.
And that's what separates the layers. The counter rotation, that's what grapples the counter rotation. It's the same centers, but it reverses and uses the same center to reverse itself. And that's the only way it's possible. And that's the only way it can happen. So I'm thinking about, I mean, I have like a list of hundreds of different predictions in the Dougherty set. So I want to start doing videos of just predictions. This, because the predictive capacity and predictive power in the set is ridiculous.
Yeah, this would fall. What mem? I'll look up the MEMS number dot, but I think that there is a numerology related MEMS number dot. But I mean, what you're talking about is the ability is. I mean, it's the most direct, powerful use of the philosophy is direct prediction, because you're getting to right to the membrane, and you're interfacing it. And now the video is becoming a MEMS, and the art is becoming a MEMS, because it's producing these incredible predictions, and especially at a rapid clip. Now, how do you are you going to propose the ways that you are going to test the predictions too, or are you just going to make predictions?
Well, I have just rambling off a couple of them. I have a new theory of speciation or phylogenesis. I've already gone over that through sonobiology and electrosonic speciation, and through sonotropism, sound being the electrical scaffolding working off of it from the sun, and Alphean waves that come off of the sun, logarithmic Alphean waves, and they bounce off of the heliopause, and they create the Bessel function, which is the ripple that dictates the geometries of these sounds, which are the creatures of the living creatures on the planet.
Let me be more specific then. Are you going to create a diagram that predicts a specific behavior and say biological process, for example, and then show that, and then either find articles that are showing this and how they're directly connected, or wait?
I'm probably going to reach out to Don Scott and explain some of this stuff to him, because it's over Rupert Sheldrake's head. So the only people that could really
we need to get it recorded. We need to get your predictions recorded, because then when the evidence comes up, because some of the predictions I did in EPMC, within 2 to 3 years, the mainstream started producing the evidence we needed. And it, so within a short period, if you have a very tight MEMS through your artwork, if it's a very tight MEMS, tighter than maybe a paper even, you might get results within months that prove what your point is, but it's got to be well documented so that it can make an excellent MEMS documentation. That's powerful stuff, what you're talking about, because that can be fed in. If Nick's own project and his MEMS work is ever reaches the magnum opus level he wants, that kind of data going into a data analysis can become a feedback loop that can literally begin predicting and building the world, even within our lifetimes, that could save us from ourselves, from our what would you call it, abusive, self-destructive PTSD of the cataclysms, and lead us towards that future where we're actually the good stewards and the people that we could be, the way that the natives were, although they weren't good to each other, they were good to their environment.
Well, maybe we're caretakers of the galaxy and the universe, and we just haven't evolved, and we just haven't evolved there yet. And maybe we are the angels, but the technology has to get there.
And we better hurry up.
Yeah, we better start working a little bit harder, I would say, because there's no doubt that there's plenty of the potential. As Rick was pointing out, there's not a lack of voltage available, and you can transfer all that voltage into current. So the real issue is the mentality, the reason that whatever reason people won't connect to the big G, and the ones who do are flourishing. I mean, it's painful, but it's, because you're in pain for other people, and you're in pain because the system punishes people who don't worship mammon. But you're still doing better than a lot of other people because they're medicating with drugs, they're medicating with alcohol, they're medicating with destructive behaviors. They're reenacting the Venus, Mars, cataclysm. They're creating, some of them at the higher echelons of power, they're creating weapons of the gods in order to aim at other humans. I mean, we didn't get into the human flesh industry, but obviously there's probably some, PTSD crossover from that is like just ancient repetition of really bad programs. Well, so we can design data structures that quickly reverse this behavior, and there's data proof for this ethereal involvement. I mean, that's extremely powerful stuff that I would like to document and put into academia. I'll be right back.
I'd just like to mention something, if I may. And all this is when you talked about the circle that didn't quite overlap when it meets when it goes around the circle. There's kind of a disparity, and it causes this chirality. The same thing happens in music. That if you go, I've got a diagram that illustrates it, and it's and if you go right through the visual, the audible frequencies, the frequencies don't quite overlap with the numbers. They don't quite do it. I'll find the diagram because it's quite interesting, and it illustrates this kind of a circle that you've got to vary it every time you go around it. I haven't expressed that too well, but this diagram, I'll find it, and I think I've posted it on your site before, Ramon, but I'll find it again because it's interesting. That's one thing, and the other thing I'd like to mention is, when you say the figure 8, holds the key to the shape. If you were to fold that figure 8 where the twist is, and then that twist kind of moves around, and it's 3-dimensional. Maybe it's that kind of shape that's being expressed as well.
Well, that's exactly what it is, but there's an added layer of beauty to it, as there usually is in all sequences of reality that I understand and that I study deeply. It's all phase conjugate from every loop to every loop. The golden mean from loops. I'm trying to find my golden mean caliper right now. Frantically searching. I have lots of them. I started making them years ago.
I'll see if I can find this diagram as well. Sorry,
Okay,
Robert.
Rob, I was going to make a comment
make your comment.
Yeah. The trauma event that occurred due to the catastrophes that wiped out large numbers of people. Right. One of the responses of people who suffer traumatic events is they want to regain or get control over their environment completely as possible. So maybe some of the machinations, the psychotic behaviors we see are the people, somehow in touch with these disastrous events, trying to set their environment in such a way as those disasters are not going to repeat. And I suspect some of that behavior is actually occurring in the modern world, where we're trying to control our environment so it doesn't muck us up.
Oh, dude. Okay, you guys want to see it? You guys want to see it? I'll share my screen. I think I can share my camera too. It's up to you. I'm asking you if you want to see it. The proof.
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it.
Of concept of what is the mechanism of counter rotation in systems. All right, here, let me see if I can share my screen.
While it's doing the screenshot. One other thing we need to remember about plasmas, at different temperatures, don't mix. They isolate from each other. So plasmas can self-isolate in a mix of plasmas.
There you go. We got you, buddy.
Whoops. I need to
Got
switch
your
around
picture, but not your screen.
I need to switch around my. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now let me go somewhere where there's a better light. Maybe here.
So okay.
Spider web.
You guys can see that? All right.
You try not to move.
All right. I'm trying not to move.
Why am I not seeing anything?
I don't know if you can go zoom in.
I can't see anything. I'm not getting. I saw your camera for a brief moment, and I'm not seeing anything.
What about you guys?
Yeah, we're getting that.
Yeah, Ramon, you're just gonna have
nested. You got nested loops.
Okay, so these are I've exposed these many times in the Dougherty set. And if we believe Don Scott, then we're looking directly down a birkeland current with as much detail as if you're standing inside of it, and it shows some of his predicted. So this is the golden mean caliper, and this is further proving Don Scott's model and many other types of models. But it's the Dougherty set, so it's a Theodortian root inverse square Bessel function. How you get this nested forest of torus. The Dougherty set's a forest of torus. So
the cylinders that the current cylinders that are talked about in the birkeland current are actually twisted loops, and they're interconnected.
So look at this. Take the golden mean caliper right here. You got your love is watching golden mean caliper that I designed like 20 years ago or something. Or I didn't design it. It's not my design. I reverse engineered it. I bought one for a demo tool, and then I reverse engineered it in 3D, cut it. But whatever. So you take this golden mean caliper, and you see it's the golden mean. You flip it, and bam, right there. So from the central axis to the point of the where it reverses, the reversal point is the pinch point. So of the analemma, or the figure eight, which also has another name. I can't remember right now. Figure eight. So that's in phase conjugation. That's multiples of the golden mean, because you can take it here, then go to the next branching system, and it's omni-expansive, omni-contractive, omni-implosive, omni-explosive. So this is the type of geometry, and it's also similar to the isotropic vector matrix that Buckminster-Fuller was talking about, which is in the A3 lattice mathematically. So this is just one of the. Now I guess I'll explain the counter rotation. So imagine the red is spinning this way, right? So the point directly in the center, the pivot point, is actually where the counter rotation and what forms the double layering. So this is how double layers are formed. So then you have the blue rotating this way, then you have the red rotating this way. So it's counter rotation, but it shows that there's a locking mechanism of these toroids that happen to be in phase conjugation. The whole system can't expand or contract unless it was in phase conjugation, which means the golden mean, which is where the golden mean comes from. It is the farthest fraction from being able to be cut down into a fraction. It's the most irreducible of all, most irrational of all irrational numbers. It's the cause of creativity, phi, and beauty and ratios and workability and dexterity. You know, your hands, everything. But yeah, that's a little bit about the system there.
But where you're looking at those spirals that are occurring with the black, and you're creating loop links that go into the image.
Okay, here I'll show.
So the birkeland current mechanism, where Don's talking about cylinders, they're not actually cylinders. What they are is threaded conduits that are close enough together that looks like a cylinder.
Well,
and that cylinder, because it's a spiral,
there's a cylinder. The cylinder, there's a sheath. There's a cylindrical sheath, but it's also helical, and it's also toroidal node.
But the actual cylinder that Don Scott's describing is actually a set of helical paths. So there's nested. It's like, imagine you got a whole bunch of helices that are the same thing, and they're just a little bit apart from each other, and they form a cylinder, or what looks like a cylinder from a field geometry point of view. They're not. It's not actually a cylinder. It's a series of nested helical paths. So you imagine you got a large number of spirals that are about the same diameter, all running the same conduit path. I'm thinking of that model where the guy had it might have been Distinti, where he had two spirals and he was getting them to rotate through each other to describe the magnetic field. Well, what I think is occurring is that the electrical discharge mechanism that's occurring is following those, but there's a large number of spirals that are linked together and cross, because the geometry you're showing is giving you a nodal network mechanism that describes the general form of the cylinder, so that can vibrate and expand and contract and do all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But what you've got is a series of helical paths that together look like a cylinder.
Yes.
And they're interlinked. They're interlinked and locked.
The cylinders are created at the double layers. The cylinders are the double layers. The double layers are the outside of the helical winding path. Yes.
But there's two sets of surfaces involved.
And there's a counter rotation that builds up the cylinders as well.
Yeah.
And the outermost cylinder of all cylinders, like whether it's a tornadic wind, which would be the tornado itself, the outside cylinder, is always the diameter of an odd number. I don't even know how to say it. It's always.
It will always be. I think they're actually prime numbers.
It's wait. It's always an odd number. It's always an odd number, and all prime numbers are odd numbers except for 2.
Except for 2, yeah.
Which is why 2 is a prime number.
Exactly. So what you've got is a Dougherty set mechanisms that occur for each of the prime numbers, and 2 has an interesting thing because that's what drives the polarity interconnect, I reckon. The figure 8 is driven by the fact that there's a a number 2 involved. 2 to the
It's
power.
the figure 8 is because it's quaternion. The figure 8 is because the nested helical filaments that have a specific ratio always are quaternion, and that diameter is quaternion. Every single filament inside of the odd filament that makes up the outermost beingness of something is even. Every single number is even. Every cylinder, every shaft, every part of it that can multiply within the system is an even number. The outermost numbers are always what we would consider as gods or angels, because those are the outermost of our systems, of our minds, that we can comprehend of the system, right?
You know, before I go treat this patient, I want to say that it dawns on me that the Chinese have only had the hegemony on the law of polarity on account of that they understood the 6 basic functions. But if we were to systematize what we know from electromagnetism and from these geometries into a series of statements about the polarity, about the law of polarity, we would truly be fulfilling their prediction that enlightenment is associated with the fire trigram, and that we would be then. It's a slippery law, especially because it sits opposite of relativity, but we would be capable of perhaps truly futurizing our society if we understood the law of polarity deeply. And I just want to put that out there because I know you guys are going to continue with these geometries.
That's a great point. While you treat your patient, I'll just say the law of polarity, according to what I know, which isn't much, and I love always learning more, is the law of polarity is what we've been talking about here for a minute, which is the golden ratio. The golden ratio is the law of polarity, and you're always preponderantly facing towards one or the other. In your philosophies, in your life, in the system of all things, the stretching and morphology of plasma or space from one moment to another is interdependent on phi. Phi is the solution to geometric and arithmetic progression. All things that progress and grow outward, all systems that stellate or aggregation is only possible due to phi. It's the solution to it. This is what Dan Winter so eloquently has been on repeat saying, until someone and more people start saying that guy's right and start pointing at him and saying this is why he's right and backing up the evidence. I didn't know what to call it. I mean, I started calling it golden scaling because the whole system is gold. It's a scaffolding of the road is gold. The kingdom of the New Jerusalem, what they're talking about in the Bible is literally the Dougherty set. It's completely gold. It's the universe. It's not the Dougherty set. It's the universe. They're describing a very simple, simplex geometry of 12 circles around a center, 12 pearls around a center, and with 3 gates to the north, 3 gates to the east, 3 gates to the south, 3 gates to the west, which is the Knights Templar geometry of their crest, and it's just so obvious that
there are two sets of elements, well, 3 sets of elements to go into it. Geometry is very important in the sense that the simplex creates nodes that then produce all the other platonic solids and other geometry structures that we call regular. You've also got that simplex geometry directly produces the golden ratio, and in rotation, in motion, you get phi. You get, sorry, pi.
Yes, that's what I was
So
trying to say.
So there's
systems, real quick, systems progressing. That's what progressive geometry is. Is what you're saying, phi.
Yeah, but it's interrelationship between the golden ratio
and Euler's number,
the pi ratio, the geometry, the simplex geometry and its nodes, and expansion into other platonic solids and regular polygon structures. And then there's a resonance, and this produces a resonance frequency mechanism. There's an interaction possible because, you know, the fundamental charge is an expression of resonance, and the resonance occurs in a polarity dimension in the even prime number too. There's always, I call it the law of opposites, you know, good and evil, love and hate and all that sort of stuff. It's the same as polarity, but the fundamentals are that there's a relationship between a multiplicative relationship between 2 and all the other prime numbers. There's a power relationship of a number raised to a prime power. There's a divisional one, raised to the inverse of a prime number as well. Excepting, you've got to have exceptions when you do that. You can't have 0. You can't invert 0. Inverting 1 doesn't do anything. Inverting 2 and 5 results in a terminating number. But the rest of them become transcendental instantly if you invert a prime number. So the argument that I had the presentation I gave a couple of months ago about prime numbers aren't just whole numbers. The transcendental numbers, I think.
You're talking about topological loops. We're talking about loop theory. We're talking about Hopf vibrations and twistor theory. Now, nobody was smart enough, and nor is there a big team big enough yet, I don't think, to understand twistor theory. But it is a great theory that uses Maxwell's equations. And what was I saying? Lord Kelvin was right with these topological loops and these braids. They're analemmas. And they're all in the Dougherty set, and they're all nested ratios of birkeland currents and how charge efficiently distributes.
But the Maxwell equations aren't the correct mathematical model required.
Well, you can use them. You can use other models too, which is why I opened up the bridge and said the Hopf vibrations.
Well, I was going to suggest that the Weber model for the electron interactions using Weber's dynamics, and then expanding it with proper dipole treatment, which he didn't do, you'll probably get a much better set of mathematics to model the behavior that's really going on. I mean, Maxwell's is close.
Yeah. Well, Tate's theory of which is a bridge right off of Lord Kelvin's theory. Tate was the first person to create the smoke ring. Well, not the first person, but use smoke rings as a demonstration that particles can be linked. So he mapped out the loop, a lot of different loops and the loop possibilities. And I think that a combination of using Euler's number and Euler's constant, which is why I'm so happy that Hartmut-Müller is better, and he can do a presentation, and he's going to have it to me by this week. It's necessary. This guy with scalar theory, everything is scaling. So follow anything that is scalar. The book called Scale by Jeffrey West. The more you understand scaling, the more you can understand the properties of the universe and how they're interconnected with the loops that you're talking about, Robert. And the prime numbers, and why the prime numbers are so predictable. they're almost unpredictable, but they come in pairs, which is the double layering of plasma.
They come in groups, actually. You get pairs that are 2 apart, and then you get quads that are 2 apart, and then you get sixes.
Quasi numbers, yeah.
So there's weird behavior, but prime numbers are fundamental to the behavior of the sort of stuff we talk about. The universe requires prime numbers in order to be able to function.
Yeah, that's what builds the outside layers of the. You can't have outsidedness and inversion of the constants and multiplicity in the system without phi, and without the scaling rules of phi in the system, which is why in phyllotaxy of plants and the spiraling of plants growth, it all tends to, not all of it, but the Fibonacci gradually, ever so slightly progresses towards phi.
Yeah, but the Fibonacci sequence is a digital. It's not quite the right word, but it's a non-analog. No, but the Fibonacci sequence is a non-analog version of phi, because the universe it's sort of like digital in behavior, but it's digital, and it's trinary and quintinary and tenary and so on. All the prime numbers produce an encoding system based on that prime number. And the Fibonacci sequence is trying to map a discrete system into an analog system, and because phi and pi are analog.
That's how you get energy from the sun. That's how you get all of the system to start. So if you think of systems like as inside outside, you would have, and you think of the food system, what's that? The everything eating everything else. There's a solar
food
system,
web.
the food web.
Yeah.
Yeah. The food web is all interdependent on this. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with that.
Guys, I want to, as I was going down the stairs, I don't know if you got into this because I was gone, but you do realize Lead Skalnin was obsessed with phi. Of course, Lead Skalnin, not only did he do of course, Coral Castle, and he constantly talked about his Virgin Maiden, but he had a model. He had a model for the magnetic current.
Oh, yeah.
That involved nested spirals, or as you're calling, chirality.
Magnetic loop.
Correct.
Yeah. His secret was the magnetic loop, which is the heart of the magnetic wavelet, that I call it. The magnetic wavelet is surrounding every. It is part and parcel of the electromagnetic system.
Yeah. But another name for it would be there's a technology, but it's called the traveling wave tube, TWTs.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to look it up, they actually use the technology.
The shape of it is literally his secret shape. And I exposed this back in 2006. But I have yet to reveal it. So that shape is all phi. Yeah, the pinch point and the crest of the way that those two blossoming coils look. His so-called secret of his Sweet 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then there's the fine structure constant. The fine structure constant is the core of the linear birkeland current itself. the fine structure constant is where all particles come into existence, and they're regulated by the electromagnetism.
Okay. Now we've gone down deep into the weeds quite a bit. Let's wrap it back to Great Pyramids, Egypt, technology, bringing mankind to the future, because we got to a really interesting place, which is you are going to be able to make predictions. And I was saying that if we document it correctly, we can show these predictions. Maybe within a few months, there may be a whimsical manifestation where the system itself responds and either provides us the pre-evidence that already happened or gives us new data and confirmation, and then we can plug that into a larger learning apparatus that can start making predictive things, maybe even predictive technologies, predictive product, predictive changes to how we should shape our government. Because it's obvious that all the Western governments are all going to fail, and we're going to have to create new nested loop dual layer economic based plasma electromagnetic based government structures. We're going to end up with tyranny, which isn't going to work, as Robert has eloquently said many times. So that's where we were, and we had been talking about Egypt. How do we avoid the fate that the Atlanteans and the Egyptians had? Of course, I don't think our star's about to explode and split on us, but you never know, I guess.
I'm not really concerned about avoiding it. I think that
it's a transition.
So you don't think the Atlanteans caused Ra to explode, which I don't, but it sounds like you do.
Well, they might have done something to trigger it.
Well, I know what you think, Robert. What is Buddy?
I think it's a natural catastrophism that's been talked about in India forever. Yuga cycles, and you map these Yuga cycles to the weather cycles, and it's all connected in cycles. It's cyclical.
Would you say we should move forward without too much caution? I mean, do caution, but not like extreme fear of we're going to blow up our sun?
No, if you listen to Tom DeLonge, which is like apparently the guy who's at the top of exposing the UFOs. I listened to a podcast recently by him, and he talks almost identical to how I talk, and he discovered the secrets of UFOs, and he was going to expose them, and accidentally did expose the secrets, and then the government had to come out and say that UFOs and all this other stuff is real. He talks about, well, I've been talking about for a long time, the future and the past oscillate around the present moment, and that's how you have access to the whole universe. But the whole universe is hollow, so it's a hollow universe theory. But where I was going with that is he talks about a lot about the same that I talk about, some of the same stuff that I the universe. If you listen to Steve-O's podcast, Steve-O's Crazy Ride, he's recently on that, and it's kind of funny because he's dealing with the people who are the highest up in the some of the highest up in the governments, and working with this, exposing the alien agenda, which could have to do with the technology, right? I think that us communicating with angels and the big G and God is the system that's already in place, and we still have access to it. We haven't lost access to it. We have direct communication with God. We are not cursed. The curse is lifted once you understand the confusion of death. Once you understand the truth of living systems, the illusion of death goes away.
Right.
But are we gonna destroy ourselves, or does it happen naturally? I think it happens naturally, and our main objective would then be to call out to the heavens and become an archangel type or an angel type to work directly with God. I think the big objective here is how can you give God the greatest hug that you can possibly give God? And
Yeah.
that would be hugging onto the circuit and becoming part of it. Which, I mean, the whole thing is God. It's becoming one with it, right? So and when you're dead and you're
ignoring the L power would be extremely problematic, seeing how so many L's exist, including love, and we symbolize induction with L. So ignoring the L power would be a really huge mistake, especially because it's the first one out of the 0-1-1 sequence, right? Because you have the void, and then it somehow trickles into a flow and immediately lands into this L power where consciousness is rooted. And every culture around the world, methohistorically, has called it the Lord. And we should be honest about that. I mean, we have this scientism, which wants to make itself the new world religion, which wants to deny that there is a Lord. And I think that would be a whimsical mistake. I think it would be a whimsical disaster, maybe even a punishable disaster, like etherically. And then from there, L flows right into the F power, which is the force, and then the A power, and then the N power, and the P, and then into the G, and then it goes back out. It starts with the G and comes back out again. It's a dual spiral.
I think there are two elements to this. You've got the correct science of love, a science that's love and that works, and then you've got a corrupted science that fails.
Yeah.
And the corrupted science is about trying to control the environment so it doesn't destroy us or destroy me. And I don't really care about the rest of you type mentality. And what we're seeing in the world is that behavior is that there's an argument between the love of environment, going out and helping the people who need it, and accepting whatever comes as a result of that. You probably get a slap in the face, or you might get, appreciation. Anything can happen. Or you can go down the other path, which is self-destructive. It will destroy you. But I'm here looking at another site that I follow, and there's a picture of the Noah's Ark that's in Kentucky, and the lead up to this is this: my whole life has led up to a comedic perfection of this moment. Kentucky's Noah's Ark sues insurance company over damage caused by heavy rain.
That's funny.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's really funny. Not so funny as all the people who have passed away, but one family lost 4 children out of one tree. But that is funny. I would be interested to know, because I never thought it was in a floodplain. So I would be. It's kind of. Anyways, I've been over there, so.
It's on CBS. It was on CBS News, according to the Post.
Yeah. That's of course it's not really a boat; it's a giant building. But anyways, it's cute. It's one of those cute moments of history.
It's sort of like it's God's response to hubris.
Yeah, I think quite possibly, yes. All right, so we should. I think the gist of the conversation, although I know Robert has generally has some reservations, but I think humanity overblames itself for what happens. I think we should. I think we should pursue this technological and data structure level knowledge, and come to a place where we are interfacing, we'll say, with the Akashic more directly than, say, meditation and prayer, and that we may be capable of achieving something worthwhile and maturing ourselves. Because if not, I think we should do what the Mayans did, just go back to the forest.
Well, I think our science and technology has got to be life building, and if we don't do that, then we deserve coming.
So it not just the MIMS philosophy, but everything in our science should be mimsically sound. It should all be life affirming and environment affirming. I agree with that. I think that is there's a self consistency there that is hard to argue with. I mean, even if you're a crackhead, for the most part, you generally understand that children should eat apples and not Twinkies. You know, it's just it's I can't see anybody being genuine. I don't care how much of sophistry they're practicing on the left. I don't see how they could be genuine and not disingenuous and say that we shouldn't have a coherence there. And yet, you just know the mainstream is going to be propping up the human flesh industry as long as they can, and they're going to be creating technology to try and drive. If they could drive a roach or drive a mouse around like an RC car, they're going to want to drive a human around. It's going to happen.
That's part of their design.
Develop technologies that are resilient to that.
I don't know if you guys knew this, but I just watched this podcast and they were talking about the human flesh industry and how we have so many dead bodies that we have such a surplus here in America that we ship them out all over the world for the furthering, quote unquote, of science. But there was this oddities expo and fair that was just in town. And apparently this was on the podcast that they paid for one of these bodies and not for medical purposes to do a what's that when you do a dissection of the body in front of everybody?
Autopsy.
Autopsy, yeah.
So they used one of these bodies of someone who gave their consent to use their organs for science for just $500 a ticket for a person to come and watch a body get cut up. It wasn't for science. And then there's all these other weird things that people use, like your limbs and all this other stuff for. And I also heard that you're more likely they're more likely to, if you're in a bad situation and they could possibly save you, they might go the route of saving your organs instead and preserving your organs versus saving your life because you're an organ donor. And it could even come down to the decision of the person who's in the ambulance or something and sees your blood type and has a cousin that needs something of your organ or something, you know, like, and just decides to pull the plug instead of, you know, like this. That gets into weird subjects. But yeah, again, we have a surplus of body parts here
think about where all that's coming from. If Satan's an archetype because of the star has been converted into an anthropomorphized anti-god, if Satan is an archetype that really describes part of our psychological situation, what it's ultimately describing is a renouncement of the El Power's right to govern us. That it isn't the spirit. It's sort of like flipping the pinnacle upside down. Then the fire element becomes the least important. It is now at the bottom. And it's no longer that the spirit should rule, but then the ego should rule. And I think that it's incredibly dangerous. And yet, let's be honest, how much of mainstream or alt-stream science is devoted to the Lord? Outside of Christian alchemy, Taoist alchemy, and obviously Native American alchemy, because they're big on the Great Spirit, there's not a lot of respect left for this power. And what does happen is in the New Age cults, they do get into it, especially if they follow, Alan Watts or something. But often there's a corrupt idea behind it that ends up in Crowley land, and it's really dangerous. It's whimsically dangerous. I do believe. That's why I don't care
if it doesn't end up in Crowley land, it's Theosophy or some other branch of that, which then is downplayed to, Rudolf Steiner branched away from Blavatsky and, all this other stuff. And there's a division, and then there's schools of it all over the world, which are like schools of magic in a way. He's got the right idea. If you want to control the future, control what the children learn.
Of course.
Start your own school, scholastics. Be a teacher. University, Fractal University. Dan Winter started Fractal University. You know, we got to start. We everybody starts somewhere, right? Until they're squashed or until the ideas invaded and taken over and superseded and ideas are lied about. Right now, there's nothing. Nobody believes anything. There's so much disinformation about historical figures being gay that all the kids think that all the historical figures are gay now.
Hilarious.
Not all the kids, but I'm
Right,
speaking
it's a
in
lot
a
of
blanket
time.
term. But
Well, I want to say that, you know, there was a pre-MIMS paper in which I proposed that we parameterize what the new religion would look like if it were to not, whether it be created by one of us starts a church. I've often thought of starting a church for everyone else, you know, people who don't feel comfortable at Baptist church or whatever, or if it naturally evolves. And one of the main features, I mean, obviously it was egalitarian and humanitarian and all those kinds of positive things. But one of the things that I put in the parameterization is that probably we will need to see the force again, like they did in the old days, right? In the old days, they had saw the quote spirit world. They saw plasma flowing up in the sky. They saw a Tao. They saw it. They didn't just.
there's a lot of people that still see it. If you look at the comments on the Thunderbolts videos of mine, there's a lot of people that still see it. They see it everywhere. There's people that, and this is what it is, and it's emphasized by taking entheogens. You can see it. You can see more of it with taking entheogens.
I would tend to agree. But now, how to make this into a systematized world religion when there are obviously strong forces that are trying to force everybody into a fake patriarchal system that is based. It's based upon a system that's based upon cataclysms. I mean, it's 3 or 4 times removed from what happened, and then
they already corrupted it. They have corporate people going and taking ayahuasca retreats with their kids and shit, and it's just like it. I mean, it's already infiltrated the Native American church. I was a part of the Native American church. It was the closest that I felt to the true God. They preach to the Lord. They sing to the Lord. So in the Native American church, it has been very much so taken over by Christendom, but they also still preach to the great grandfather and great grandmother and the 4 corners, you know. But yeah, it seems like if we could do, and this is what Terrence McKenna was talking about, probably with Sheldrake. I think I've heard videos of the future churches. We're already doing it. They're called festivals. They're huge festivals where we have the possibility to reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, by spreading the word. How? Simply by being an artist. Simply by spreading the artwork of an artist that has a vision, that's talking about the future, or spreading the papers of you know, artists. We got to get the word out there. We have to be master disseminators of our work in order for people to try.
I've got the master inseminating down. Do we have to be master disseminating? I'm just kidding. Okay. Anyways, you know, I agree. Part of the MIMS philosophy is that there has to be action. You know, Thomas Edison, he did 1,000 experiments to create the light bulb. I mean, if he had given up at 200, we'd all be freaking using whale oil. There'd be no more whales, you know? So, it is important that we take some actual action here. I don't know if we all have to, of course, create our own little individual churches. It's something Aaron Harden wants to do, but I also think he wants to have a tax-free church. But that's just me. I think that he'd probably admit that that's what he wants.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
Yeah, but I do think the parameterization of new religion, there is an entire MIMS dot that's dedicated to the issues of religion. So far, all I've done is the meditation and the black and white spaces paper, which is where you find by the way, the animated GIF for the plasmoid going through Catherine's hair. If you ever need to reference that and tell somebody, look, we've seen a ghost on video and it's a plasmoid and it's moving on a spiral, that's the paper. It's the meditation in black and white spaces paper. But you know, a lot of interesting things are happening with all this stuff. Now, cracking the wide consciousness seems to be an issue too, because the capacity and what the Buddhists used to call innate capacity. Some people just don't have the innate capacity. And then there's the other issue, which is how much crap is in their face. They're not able to take the time to actually learn this stuff. Because in a way, we're sort of preaching to each other. We're preaching to the choir. We're all already pretty, rough and ready for EPMC. So how do we crack through the barriers to get to the people that need to know? With the early disciples, the apostles, I mean, they had the Holy Spirit and they were willing to die to get the Christendom going. I'm not ready to die.
They all did die. Most of them were martyrs.
That's right. Right away.
I think the most effective way we can help the future is to document what we understand.
I agree.
And
Publish.
Okay, the modern world doesn't want to listen to it. Well, let them go to whatever disaster they want to create for themselves. But there will be survivors, and those survivors are going to need, pointers to the truth. The other thing is, as each astrological age kicks in, the 2400 year cycle or whatever it is, 2495, 90 year cycle, that there's always been a change in the dominant religions at that time, and the changeover. So zodiacal, the old system dies and a new one replaces it. And we're seeing that happen right now. It's been happening since the 1800s. And if anything,
science is more dangerous than Catholicism.
Hey?
It has more power innately.
Yeah, but, Catholicism and scientism are the same thing, effectively. And they're destined to be destroyed.
Well, my point is we probably should stand a little bit against scientism in its takeover, because of the corruption of the Enlightenment is an issue. And it's a huge part of my part 2, by the way. I've been starting the writing. It's been delayed this morning on account of computer issues here, and I'm doing scans and such, but it was flowing very powerfully last week. And part 2 of the threefold science paper, which is the one that you were peer reviewing for me, Robert, is a part. Part 2 is the whimsical end of the discussion. And it is important, I think, that we show our ethics, show our apostle-like devotion to it, but be open to, the worst thing is when they smear us as a cult, because if we look like a cult, then it will go hard on. It will go hard on helping the future if we are conflated. I think the most annoying one is, any comparisons to flat Earth. It's really very damaging to us, and they know it, and that's why they do it. We have to fight against that.
That's just straight up lies, and we need to address it as straight up lies. But I've lost the track of where I was going to go. What's important individually in the environment is we have to be seen pursuing truth. There's not shades of truth. It's either true or it's not. It's black and white. And if we're pursuing truth, and we show by our behavior that we are pursuing truth,
yes,
then that will overcome the lies.
The truth, beauty, and love, and the pursuit to keep in harmony with nature.
Yeah, but the spotlight of truth dissolves the lie.
That was one of the commandments on I think 2 of the commandments on the Georgia Guidestones.
which is.
By the way, any news on the Guidestones? I haven't heard anything since that week.
Truth. There was apparently there's a debate. David Devine and Rex are debating on if there was a capsule that was found or if there wasn't a capsule that was found. Apparently, they both have different information, so that's interesting. A capsule underneath, you know.
Yeah, but that doesn't explain the dual induction of the electricity with the nearby light, because that is definite. I mean, it's synchronous.
Oh no, the best video that I've seen on this by far was Rex's video.
Yeah, Rex is awesome.
Rex nailed it, way better than anybody else. You watch his video and you see a car that pulls up, you see the bomb go off, you see the car pull away, you see the guy get out of the car. Yeah, it was a fucking dude. It wasn't electricity. It wasn't lightning. It could have been electricity, but
it still doesn't explain the dual induction of the light nearby.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really get into observing that. I didn't see that much.
But my point is, I think it was an electromagnetic bomb.
Oh, an EMP.
Yeah, I don't know an EMP specifically, but something caused the orange light that was about 40 feet away to increase in maximum until it also exploded. And this goes back to the point about I feel like the New World Order is at a point, the true New World Order, not all the fractures, but they're at a point where they want to introduce mankind to the next level of energy warfare. Is where I have a strong intuition that this was a special operative that set this thing off.
Yeah, it was an inside job. They didn't bust the guy. They could have busted the guy. Totally an inside job, and it was the day after CERN, so it made everybody think it's a new reality. Then they're going to say reality was reset. I mean, there's conspiracy theories for years and days, and
yeah.
I mean, reality hasn't been reset. These are all, most of these hoaxes of people looking fake and looking like they have masks on and not being real, like that video of Megan when she was like not smiling and looking around with her husband. A lot of this is put on by the Bain Corporation to get people confused, to think that there's doubles, like Chappelle is a double. I never even knew this, but yeah, it's a big psyop to make people confused, and you know, the more control.
It's an hardcore strategy. Yeah, you confuse the people.
Yeah.
Just with a chemical explosion, you can get an EMP. It's just a case of what sort of chemical explosion is going on.
Well, yeah, but this is a serious surge. I don't know. Have you seen the video? I mean, it's a major.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay.
But the surge, and it depending on the constituents of the chemical explosive used, and the direction of the blast, it can cause an EMP result. Well, it will cause an EMP result. The question is it in the direction that something is going to interact with it and cause some sort of surge occurrence occurred?
I'm going to stick with my intuition, which happened very quickly, that it wasn't lightning, that it was a directed energy weapon, and it was a statement, some kind of statement. And I don't know if it's a statement to us, honestly. It could be a statement in a different direction. The Space Forces could be making a statement to the power pedo elite. We don't know. I mean, we're not on the inside. We're unfortunately the test bed.
Even if we were on the inside, we wouldn't be getting the proper story anyway.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
Yes, but yes, in terms of directed energy devices, you could have put something as a target and then made to explode externally. But
yes.
The curious thing is the time of the explosion, the exact time that thing went off. 3:33.
Well, no, it was 33 seconds. It was like 2:33 or something. It was an off number.
Yeah, but it was 3:33 in the thing. So I think there was some sort of timing mechanism
yeah, it was
going.
like 3 minutes and 33 seconds past the hour, whatever hour it was.
Yeah. But you know, a lot of people have picked up on that sort of thing, wondering, you know, the third degree masonry sort of stuff. So you know, who knows?
Well, their number. Their number is 233 or 232, right?
Yeah, but the 33, the third 33 degree master type mentality. So there's numerology. You can look at anything and apply numerology to it, and whether you got it right or not, it's a matter of just guesswork, really.
Right.
That's true. I have to go treat the patient again. Do we want to wrap it up, or do you guys have more that you want to talk about the Hajim and the MIMS, the futurization? Still people on the call. You can keep going. We could end this one and start a new one.
Whatever. The geometric view is love is watching product. Love is watching being. Thank you for doing that. Keep your eyeballs out. Pay attention. There's a lot going down this year. Be vigilant. Be mindful. Be insightful. Be loving. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being kind. Share the love. Spread the love. Become the love. Amen. Thank you for being here for episode 69. We'll see you back for episode 70 with a new season on the horizon with a brand new style of video and interviews. We'll see you back. Love you guys. Thanks for being here. Love is watching. Amen.
Hope for the rhythm that you got, 'cause you got the first, no, the first, the thirst. Life is eternal, hope and thirsty. 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 Life is eternal, hope and thirsty.
Eyes all over the wall, eyes all over your body. Can I just see straight through with transparent golden scaling? The largest of the atom, let's embark on this because this is the journey. The journey is life. Take hold. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. There's nothing to do. Join us in the fight for Christ, in the fight to save lives. Surprise, submersible, so fast, the first, the last of baptism, need to say more. Pay attention like the marrow in your bones, arrow in your back, arrow in your lungs, zero into the back, tertiary Christian neuron synapses, and narrow endurance into eternity. I'm a courier, a charismatic attitude, modern meters even neater. It might even be fun. Cider indeed, need nerds, you need nerds, need a virtue, need to be a reason. Feasibility to be a reason to be clean and sober. Keys, open doors, signs of directions. Be the carrier of candlesticks, the man who brought you change. Every second you ride, determine the ribbon, you pivot, potential, you curve and cat. Could be cold, could be copycat, could be copy corpse, could be Schrodinger's best, could be micro actor, Mackie normal, open-minded, itsy bitsy, freaking huge, a universal supermassive aspect of attached awareness. Aware of this all?
Collaborative consumption.
Are you aware of this all?
Collaborative consumption. The new thing consumption. Collaborative consumption. Consumption.
Get up now! Out of the boat! Drop! Where did it up? We don't got about a girl, but about it, it's not about a goddess spirit. Get up, what's up? Jedi chapter. Little butter.
I'm in search of, I'm in earth love, I'm in living life, I'm in living color, I'm an airdrop, I'm an earth thing, I'm an earth thing, I'm an earth thing, I'm an earth thing.